mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
I love to see my people party with me, man.
I do.
Good to see you, Black Brown, Sweet Nikita, Miss Rhonda. Hey,
come on
happy
in, everybody.
birthday,
Welcome back.
Miss J. Hey, Rhea, Sweet Sharita. Party with me all night long. Say what? That's right, baby. Bring it to the front. Hey, Janine. Well, guess what? Hey, when I see you, yeah,
Welcome in,
I get a little happy. Hey, Black Brown, I get a little happy when I see you. What? Baby, when I see you, yeah, I get a little happy. Hey, Francine, I get a little happy when you party with me. Well, guess what? When I see you, yeah. Hey, Jay, hey, Randy, I get happy when you party with me. Guess what? When I see you, yeah, yeah. Hey, Cole, I get a little happy. Happy when I see you. What? When I see you, yeah, 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 yeah. Listen, fellas, I put your picture on my mirror. Start to blush when somebody says your name. And my stomach is a pain. See you walk in my direction, I go the other way. I start to stutter when I speak. Try to stand, but my knees go weak. What's happening to me? Anybody can you tell me what it means? I lay my head on my pillow. He got me staring out the window. Wish on a star for a sign.
Welcome back, welcome
That's
back.
the reason why, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Hey, see you. Hey,
Oh yeah,
hey, Marlon.
their catalog
You
is
sexy boy. Hey, oh,
yeah.
no. When I see you. Hey, fellas,
They do a
listen.
version of
I
Prince's
scribble
Top Light
nice and
that
old
is
on my
legendary too.
notebook. Checking out my hair and my nails, look. I feel myself up in the
Hey,
zone. Nervous
millennials.
when you call. Say I'm not home. See your face. I hear my favorite song. Should I send an
Welcome,
email
welcome, welcome, welcome,
home? I wonder if you know, or do you have a clue?
forgive me.
Yeah. I lay my
I
head on my pillow. He got me staring out the window. Wish on a star for a sign. That's the reason why. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. See you. Marlon,
Appreciate
so
you. Thank you.
sexy,
It's fun.
boy.
Have a good time.
Oh,
This is too late.
no. When I see you. Listen, something now is taking over me. Oh yeah, yeah. I'm not gonna run. I'm just gonna stand here and see. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh no. See you, sitting so sexy, boy. Yeah. Oh no. When I see you. Hey, Fox, hold me down. Listen.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? When I see you, yeah, yeah. Hey, sweet Savita. Hey, get happy when you party with me. Hey, Janine. When I see you, yeah, I get a little happy. Hey, Tony, I get a little happy when you party with me. Hey, Tim, when I see you, yeah, I get a little happy. Hey, Marlon, I get a little happy when you party with me.
Yeah, the 5 classes is doable.
When I see
is 5 separate preps, but one is a grad class, which is going to be dope. Another asynchronous and online, so I've already done all the work for it, other than the grading.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
So it's really more of an issue. As I welcome everybody in, please do like, share, subscribe, do all the things, support the Patreon if you can. I'm also interested in folks supporting the memoir project that Dr. Burroughs and Faith Evans, the real Faith Evans, no, I'm just playing, are going to be working with me on. And just saw another round of edits. Dr. Burroughs is motivated. He's engaged. So I saw another round of edits and got some feedback from another of our 00 African community with some important memories. I think it's going to be dope. I also saw that there's been, speaking of which, there's an announcement for the November celebration of the 20th anniversary of Black Agenda Report taking place in New York City. And I just saw that has been planned, and I'm going to have to do my own commemorative look at the 20th anniversary of Black Agenda Report. And which will also factor into the memoir. My time at the launch of BAR, moving from Black commentator, meeting Glenn at that just before that switch took place, and sort of being there from the inception. I have some memories and some thoughts. So have a little mini 20th anniversary of Black Agenda Report here at some point in the next few months or weeks or whatever. So please stay tuned. Make sure you have the bell rung so you don't miss anything. And by the way, in terms of the memoir project, I'm not going to front. I have looked, some of the names people decide to leave their name when they make a donation. And not only am I, honored and impressed by the amount we've reached so far, but some of the names are very impressive too. And I will not be unimpressed by the fact that one of the names we saw making a significant contribution is Ilyasa Shabazz. So Malcolm's daughter, one of Malcolm's daughters, is involved in supporting the project, and I am honored by that and take that to mean I don't know. I think it's dope, and I think it speaks to in some ways to my own contribution, but also to that of Dr. Burroughs, and yeah. So that was dope. So salute to her and to everyone else who at least considers the project, and thank you very much in advance. And with that, let me go ahead and bring up not really a guest, but my project partner on this Donut King project, Sudip Bhattacharya, whose work is linked in the show description, Substack and beyond, and the full playlist. And Sudip, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome.
Loud and clear. Right
Glad
on.
to be back.
Well, you were loud and clear. Now I feel like it.
Oh, never mind.
There you go.
Okay, I put it away for some reason. I don't know why I did that.
Yeah. Stu Dope. Yeah, I like that. You have a new nickname.
We're always coming up with stuff.
Yeah, the undefeated chat is no, I appreciate that so big. Yeah, it was dope. I'm not gonna front. I saw that, was like, oh, that was nice. So yeah, Sudip. So we the homework assignment for today's discussion, and again, I'm just reminding everybody that this is our ongoing public meeting sessions for what we've titled the Donut King Project. The full playlist is linked in the show description and is an ongoing research and forthcoming project in looking into the gaps between popular discussions and narratives around Black and Asian economics and the realities of those situations. And Sudip, you had a great idea to have us read a book I've heard about for a long time, but never read. Vijay Prashad's Everybody Was Kung Fu Fighting, Afro-Asian Connections and the Myth of Cultural Purity, that was published in 2001 on Beacon Press Books. And I will never say that I read it carefully enough. And I think there's a lot in here that deserves deep dives and follow-ups. But I did read, and I have some notes and some thoughts. And one chapter in particular that I really think hits the nail on the head for our project, even if it has some things in it with which I disagree. But coming off of and I don't know if you want to say anything because you've written about it, but I thought it was interesting that coming off of, Vijay is currently in a I guess from my vantage point, a sort of viral moment in response to his condemnation of that Guardian open letter in defense allegedly of Iranian political prisoners and the the false equivalence of blades and scissors letter. And I thought his response was great, and I think and I see he's been interviewing on it, and Millennials Are Killing Capitalism did a great panel following up on all of that the other day. You participated, and so I encourage people to check that out if they haven't seen it. And yeah, so I just thought it was interesting timing that we were reading this book as Prashad was sort of bubbling back up. And then also a few months ago, I was covering his work around the Tricontinental Conference, that work that he was talking about, the history of, which dovetails very nicely with his work here. So anyway, again, welcome, and I'll let you, offer up some initial thoughts or however you whatever.
No, first thing I admit, I thought I read this book. I didn't actually. I don't think so. So I was I'm restructuring the library at our apartment because I have way too many books I smuggled in. And so my partner's like, we can't live like this. So I am trying to put some books back in my parents' place. So I told them, hey, I'm going to put some books back here. And they were like, what books? So it was a funny conversation. So looking through the collection, I just happened upon this book because I've read other Vijay Prashad books. I've actually taught Red Star Over the Third World with my students for the Marxist theory class I taught that one time, which was like a 3-hour class, which I loved. And I taught that book because it's actually short. It's to the point. And it also brings up, I think, like other Prashad's work, some interesting contradictions and tensions. Because in that book, it sort of talked about how the Soviet project had to deal with Central Asian republics or Central Asians, not Central Asian, but Central Asian parts of the Russian Empire, but how those Central Asian places also, once they smelled a chance of getting independence, it was mostly led by very sort of right-wing, quote unquote, Islamic forces. So the Soviets came in, they helped a lot of women to actually open schools. So it was a very interesting text that brought out a lot of interesting things for my students. So I think he has a good track record of writing things rather accessibly, actually. And the other book I read that I really liked was The Darker Nations. And I bring that up because that book is where he focuses a lot on the Bandung Conference, and he works through, I think, at least 3 iterations of how internationalism was. So it went from the Bandung Conference, and maybe slightly before. I forgot what the third one is, but maybe like right before colonialism officially ends, the Bandung Conference, and then the Tricontinental, and talking about how there was this sort of growing split between necessary split between some forces who achieved decolonization or formal freedom without complete violence, although that's always there. Even in the Indian context, they'll tell you otherwise, but there were a lot of peasant uprisings everywhere. But then he obviously refers to Tricontinental with Castro and everyone saying, hey, armed revolution is not that bad. So he has that track record, which I like. But for some reason, I was looking through this and I was like, oh, because I was looking at. I think the initial plan I had was the William Gardner Smith book, Stoneface, because I'm just being honest. I was just like, oh, this seems interesting. But then when I started reading it, I did have the feeling like, because I realized Adam Schatz. I still like the book, but I realized Adam Schatz was the intro. So I was like, oh, I don't know about this either. So I was glad you said we need to rethink this. So
Yeah, I just
I
wanted
found
to rethink because I had just dealt with his discussion of Fanon last year and was like,
right.
I'm good, I'm good. But it's also interesting, the Darker Nations book from Prashad was the only one I had read in full before this one, and I remember at the time when it came out, I was reminded of that reading this one because I was bothered by its leaving out Black America's contribution to internal colonialism and internationalism. Right. And I remember at the time I was like, no disrespect to Tanzania, but I was like, you got 2 chapters that focus on Tanzania and nothing that even mentions Black America.
Right.
And I don't know that I was being fair. I'm just admitting that is at the time how I thought, and because of the work I was focused on at the time, which was about Black America and internal colonialism, I was like, where, it would have been great to have any reference to it. And I remember at the time I had reached out to him because I was using part of his book in a class, and I wanted him to visit the class and interview. But I did tell, and initially he said, yeah. And then as we were setting it up, I said, I do have this slight critique that I just would want to raise when you join the class. And then I never heard from him again. So I don't know if that's why. And I don't know if it was just one of those things that happens.
Yeah.
But it has always been. So then when I started reading this,
right,
where he does talk a lot about, so like if he had said, I didn't say anything about it in Darker Nations, but I had already written some about your concerns about Black America and internationalism in Kung Fu fighting.
Right.
I'd have been like, that's dope. I appreciate that. And then we could, it would have helped me and I would have read this book even sooner.
Right.
But even as he engages African America or Black America in this book, Kung Fu Fighting, on the one hand, I'm impressed by some of the breadth of his coverage, and he gets into areas that I'm familiar with that I would have never expected Prashad to know anything about.
Right.
Particularly Afrocentricity and African-centered work. But then he does it in a critical way. And I was wondering then if that did lead to his decision to leave Black America out of Darker Nations because of the criticism he has for I forgot the word he uses, but the parochial approach to race in so anyway, these are just some of the but
yeah,
that was it.
That's how I respond when someone emails me. I was like, oh yeah, dope. And then they email me like, oh Sudip, I have a small problem with line 2. I'm like, dope, delete, gone.
Delete, never answer again. Absolutely. And then the flip side is also I have been guilty of either just missing emails or forgetting stuff. And then people, he's a busy guy and he doesn't know me, so it wasn't like he owed me anything like that. But it was just it was just the
that's how I respond to everybody.
But absolutely.
They're like, oh Sudip.
Any slightest criticism,
right?
And we never speak again.
We never speak again.
Never again.
My dad's like, hey, I saw your article. I kind of like this part. Nope.
Haven't talked to him in 6 months.
It's the reverse option for me. Everyone's like, oh, I let go of my parents because they're, and it's just like his son out here. Like, what is going on? Like, do you know what Sudip's doing? Is like, I just see him on YouTube, every few months. Nah, they've been sharing all these stuff. They actually watch it on their TV, all the YouTube stuff that I've been doing and other things. But it's pretty funny because they're like always lost on where they're happening. It's like, Mom, I post them on Facebook, and she's like, I'll watch it later. She just says it, and then they just watch for like 2-3 hours, I guess. So it's kind of funny. But I like Prashad, but I also agree, like there's always these there's like certain interesting dynamics in the book that I think we could get into as well, for sure. Because I also had a similar vibe, maybe about certain avenues of discussion and how he's presenting certain things. But I think also at the same time, the book, there were a couple of lines near because I had a feeling of what chapter you're talking about. I think it's a chapter on merchants. I think maybe
Yep.
you might have a
Chapter
focus
4,
on.
right?
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah,
yep.
because I saw you put a video out, but I also knew instantly when I was reading, I was like, oh, this is really perfect. And then the chapter
The
5, which
merchant is
talks
always
about,
stranger. Yeah, that
yeah,
one.
and I like how you led with Malcolm X's quote, just to be like really real about things and how he himself was, um, again, like I saw you reference Lewis Gordon. I also had the same response. I'm actually giving his book away because I was like, I don't want to deal with this. Because I mean, I've met him. I think he used to wear the Rutgers, but there's a certain level of like when you step across the line when it comes to everything having to do with Israel and him now, sort of using a man's legacy and thought to reinforce things. That's where I can't take it. I'm not saying it's any better if you don't say anything, but it's like it's too much if you do too much about it. So I'm like, I don't need this book. I mean, like, what would I gain? I think it's about black radical thought or blackness, and I'm like, fair, but you don't even want to talk about this issue, so I'm just gonna give
Look,
the book away.
yeah, I'm bad like that too, and I part of my method is to ask myself and be real, and sometimes even or go overboard with I don't.
Yeah,
There really isn't one person that you absolutely need to get to a certain conclusion or an analysis. So in other words, I always feel like I'm always like, I'm like, if I don't read your work, can I still get the information and the analysis I need? And for the most part, it's
right.
like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, you're not the only one.
Yeah.
Like I can avoid you and still learn what I need to learn and not have to.
Well, there's
But
also
yeah,
a discussion
anyway,
about
yeah.
Fanon. Like, really, I
Mhm.
one day, like, I think there is a cottage industry around Fanon that also weirdly presents him in ways that are quite, not use the word as a critique, which I agree, but I think are actually parochial and narrow. Like, there's like, conversations around Fanon which focus maybe on black skin, white masks. There are other conversations on Fanon which focus on concepts of solidarity, but it's never always, you know, clear that the person read a lot of his stuff because he himself is very, you know, of the times as well. And he was a writer and scholar who adapted, as you can tell from a lot of his essays. So that's one thing I also get frustrated with dealing with Fanon in particular. Sorry for that. I just get really, because there is like always every few years when there's an uprising or an arrest, people start wanting to read Fanon. And then I get worried about who they see as presenting Fanon. And then it just sort of, well, like you said, with Adam Schatz, it's like, it's sort of, you know, there's no, it's almost like the Vernon philosophy. It's like, might as well not even teach Fanon because you just ruined it. So that's why there's certain topics where I get even more annoyed. Like there's certain topics where I don't expect much, but then if someone's using Fanon to derail legitimate critiques against the Israel Zionist state, that is insane to me. So that's where I also was like, I don't need this anymore, because I was like, I think it was called The Black World or something, and I was very excited to read it, but then after that I didn't care.
Yeah, I sort of similar. I think there is a parallel to our project here, that there is a cottage industry around rebranding, radicalism,
Yes.
responses, etc. So this is in part why I've wanted us to do this and wanted to do something akin to this for a long time, because again, a lot of arguments with which we might end up disagreeing start with a foundation of reality, and obviously part of that foundation is there's a lot of hostilities, there's a lot of abuse going on, and a lot of people trying to figure things out. Colonialism is happening, capitalism is happening, and that leaves room, obviously with the academic cottage industry around Fanon, but in this case also it leaves a lot of room for people to build entire careers seemingly to be talking about radical critical figures, ideas, histories, and doing it in ways that are decidedly unradical, and reaffirming the colonial approach. So what I've wanted for our project, and what I saw particularly in that one chapter, because Prashad's book is wide ranging, and so there's a lot, so it's not that I'm saying the rest of the book is useless. I am just saying that in terms of our project, that chapter 4 for me really came closest to dealing with and dealing with it in a way that I would want us to. Because even if there are areas that I might not agree fully, what I see Prashad doing is actually something similar to this other book that I'm reading separately, The Jewish Question, a Marxist Interpretation. Paraphrasing Marx from that book to say, we want to look at, as Marx says, the real Jew. And by that, he means the Jew that has evolved in material history and in response and in, you know, to the contradictions of human civilization and all of that, as opposed to these mystical, the Jew in the, you know, and that we even see Prashad dealing with a little bit in that chapter vis-a-vis Mount. It's like, is it this magical Jew that is doing something, or is something happening materially in the process of colonialism that allows for a set of those currently defined as Jews to do things that other communities cannot do? And it's not, again, it's not mystical. It can be explained through material history. So I just appreciated that aspect. But so, yeah, I don't know. Do you want to go through, you know, I have a few sort of highlights and talking points and sort of broad points that I've written down about the book, but do you want to give some overview or walk us through some of your...
Is it okay if I give just a quick overview and then you can lead with the points?
Absolutely.
I just want to, because I want to go where you want to go with the merchant stuff too, because I think that is the most, because there's parts. So this book is not that long-ish, but it's very dense actually. I feel like, because it's sort of the book's main intention, I feel like, is to expose the limits of how certain people discuss African American or Afro and Asian, because he talks about globally too, relationships politically. I think that's the main crux of the book, which is true. Like most of the times, as we were discovering in our analysis, we even with Rick Chow and the child he murdered, there is a lot of sort of rhetoric that is maybe not charged, but definitely even when they're sort of like critical or even complimentary, it's still very binary. Like when certain people will say, well, look, there's I think you showed me that video once of the history of Chinese American still owners in Mississippi Delta. I think people were sharing that to give context correctly with Rick Chow, but still that is a binary that serves the Asian population. I may be too harsh, because that doesn't explain Rick Chow. Like Rick Chow is not a Chinese American guy working in Mississippi Delta during Jim Crow apartheid. He's an asshole who came. Sorry, he's a horrible human being, a monster who came and, you know, partook in that business he didn't have to, and then he killed a child. So it's very different. So I still think there is this need for that bigger approach, which we're trying to do, but some of that's here in this book. But he goes through a lot really quickly. He goes through how race and racism as we know it is essentially a rather unique and new phenomena, because in the first chapter he goes through hundreds of years of history prior that explains, which I love. I actually like the beginning, because this is something I learned in Rutgers when I took these Afrikaner classes, and they talked about how you have so much trade, so much wealth of, like, a real globalization, you know, between Africa, Asia, and parts of Europe too, like, you know, Italy, Greece. Like, it's not like the way that some of us are taught growing up to this day is very, of course, Eurocentric. Like, oh, there was, you know, what Europe is doing, but the world was normal before Western Europeans and Northern Europeans decided to go crazy after fighting each other and use the only technology they knew, which was killing, to kill the rest of us. So I really like that chapter. And then he builds into it the rise of white supremacy. He has an interesting take about how even you can find essentialisms that are adopted by the marginalized, which I liked as well, which is very true to our project, because you have people who are Black, brown, Asian who will say things like, well, speaking of even Jewish folks, like there's a lot of people who say things around me and people I've known growing up, older folks, who will say things like, well, and living in New York City, they would be like, oh, Jewish people, they'll say things that are rather like hateful or anti-Semitic for real, but then they'll still say the Jews got it going because they did what they did, and that's why we're still losing. But it's like weird. So it's like,
yeah, it's not, the Jews are horrible, they're demonic, they're terrible, they killed our savior. But if we could do what they do,
right,
if we could be like them, we could learn so much about how they circle the wagons and engage other communities. And I've always been like, are you hearing you're not hearing the disconnect and all of that? But yeah.
No, I didn't mean to but like as Hindus and Muslims, like we don't even like for Hindu. I've heard it from Hindus too, where people like, and again, New York City is important to this, because if you grow up and you're born raised in New York City, I'm now a suburban kid. My partner was making fun of me the other day. That upset me so much. I was like, I'm from New York. She's like, really? And then I was like, whatever. I don't want to talk. I also deleted her emails. It went to the emails while I was on the phone. I'm like scrolling for emails, but at the same time, I didn't say a word. I was just,
how dare you? I'm a city kid. delete.
Even though I had a heart attack when I got on the Queens Expressway when I went to show her my old house, I was like dying. And I was like, oh my god. But the thing is, what was I say? So yeah, there is this like, so when you grow up in New York City, you do imbibe a lot of, it's real. Like, you grow up, like I'm a 90s kid, but I grew up with the shadow of Ed Koch, who was a piece of shit. And I grew up with, like I said, the other episodes of my father complaining about him driving the car and listening to a show and being stuck in a car. So there's all these like understandings of Jewishness and race and stuff that are there for me, because even growing up we used to have real fights in the street with some of the white Jewish kids who would see us as only Muslim and vice versa. But still, even with those fights, people would still say like, look what they got. I mean, we had the house too, but they would say like, look what they got their own country. So this book talks about that essentializing, which is great. And then it moves into the sections that I think we'll focus more on, which is the merchant history, like how Malcolm X talked about Jews, how people talk about Korean Americans, which reminds me of Claire Jean Kim. And then it goes into the final half, which is mostly about, frankly, I have some lines here, but it was really about the beauty of Marxism, communism as being a glue. But even prior to that, I want to say, actually, there's one other moment I forgot. He does talk about Garveyism in a really good light, which I appreciate. He did say like how Garveyism handled a lot of Indians, and I want to say, I was reading this, and every single time there were so many Bengalis mentioned. It was hilarious. I was like, and also when he didn't have to say it, Mazumdar, I'm pronouncing it like a gringo, but that's a Bengali name, and there's other Bengali, like Muslim folks have certain Bengali names too, but it's mostly like you can tell the last name was. So I was like, oh my god, it's another guy. And fun fact, the co-creator of the Mexican Communist Party is this Bengali guy, I think M.N. Roy, who circled all the way across the world. A friend of mine from Mexico told me this. He's like, dude, I found this out. You guys get everywhere. And I was like, what can I say? We're really annoying. So,
but I look, first of all, I made a note like on the last page. So I wrote at the end. So I said, to your point. So I said, so internationalism, communism, and anti-colonialism. That's like so that's what you're saying. So it's like so after all of this, you're just basically saying we need a Marxist, internationalist approach, and it'll solve everything. But I did think, to your point, I thought it was so much of the book he's talking about stuff I just don't know anything about. From a perspective, I just don't know anything about. So, and it did feel like I'm reading the previously, for me, unknown history, the Bengali view of black history. Because it's like, because I did at some point, some of my notes in the margins are like, are you doing too much? Because it almost feels like he's going out of his way to retell the histories of Garvey and Malcolm through the lens of the one Indian guy in the back corner of the room. You know what I mean? It's like it's like if they had a conversation, if he can find a black man spoke to an Indian, he's like, that was the moment, and that gets documented. So it was just this weird thing. So I was like, was Garvey? I was like, all right, he had his Indian buddy, but I was like, I never read about this guy. Like, I don't know, when did he factor in?
Don't erase
to become this major, and the Bengali dude in the back of Malcolm's meeting or whatever.
I know that was.
It's like, where was I was like, I'm like, word. I was like, I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just
Right,
like,
right.
I just like,
He-
I'd never, the
well,
emphasis was
right.
interesting to me. It's like the because I've never read anything where that was the emphasis.
He grew
It
up.
was
He
like,
grew up. I
wow.
think he's born and raised in West Bengal, and like I said, with
Yeah.
my family relationship, that's CPIM territory for a long time until recently.
Mm,
West Bengal fell to the BJP, which was, it's like Boston falling to MAGA. Like it's unheard
mm,
of. So just
mm.
recently it happened, and it was very disgusting because it was a lot of thuggery that we'd never seen before in that region. Like, you know, it's like it's very North Indian. I don't know, but very North Indian-ish behavior that we were seeing in West Bengal, which is technically North and East, because there were thugs on bikes, uneducated thugs just going on bikes, breaking shit in museums. They don't even know who they're breaking, and then they were also breaking monuments to Lenin. Like it's a whole thing. So that culture there. But the book that came to mind, if people are interested, is called Bengali Harlem. It's by Vivek Bald, Bald. He writes about this a lot, and that was a book that I do think shows a lot of evidence, at least for a lot of Bengalis. Because the thing is, Kolkata and West Bengal was for a while the epicenter, along with Punjab in some sense, because Punjabis brought in the military side of things, but the Bengalis brought in the quote unquote intellectual base. So they did create Kolkata to a sense, but that also like that's the contradiction which Amilcar Cabral talks about with the petty bourgeoisie. Because once the petty bourgeoisie is trained to be bureaucrat, but they also have dreams. We have dreams. And then when we hit a wall where the Portuguese guys is telling this black guy from Angola, like, hey, wait a minute, you got to go back to Angola and be an engineer there. They're like, wait a minute. So it starts to turn the wheels a minute for some people. And that's what happens. So some Bengalis do get around, but I did enjoy the Malcolm X part because he mentioned such random things like he's in the back. I think he mentioned like meat cutters. And I was like, damn, that's hilarious. That's like, I actually thought about the Bengali guy or Pakistani guy I used to get my meat from. Like my mom would go and I hated it because it sounds so obnoxious. And I'm thinking like, wow, I guess Queens and Jackson Heights, like just the episode. But then again, to Malcolm X's credit, he did go to London, you know, right before his assassination, and he did sit down with a bunch of Daisies there because the idea of blackness was quite political there in the UK at the time. Yeah. So I'm giving credit to him. No, I'm not, Jared. I'm just saying, don't erase us. Don't erase our voices.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I agree with you. I thought it was hilarious. I was like, because it was also funny how particularly it was Bengali. And I'm like, it was like Bengali cut meat for him, and he loved the supermarket. Like he, where else would he go for halal meat? And I was like, damn, this is crazy. Like, like, he has a receipt. Like he saw a receipt one day, and he was like, oh man, he bought a movie from a Bengali-owned Blockbuster. That guy talked to him about, you know, Mississippi Masala or some shit, and then it like becomes this legend. So I did understand that, but it was really funny because I was circling so much, and I was like, there's also this one instance where this one black guy from Philly, right, who he was around the time when when slavery was around in South, and he had literally thrown out slaver supporters out of his church or protesting. He was a real guy, and then he revealed that he was Indian. He was actually an Indian guy. You remember that? So I was like, what the heck? I was like, damn, okay. So right,
so he
cool.
said, like, I'm just trying to find an example for our audience to get an idea. Like on page 106, he says, when Malcolm moved to Harlem to take charge of New York City's Temple Number 7 on Lenox Avenue on 116th Street in 1954, he had not been a Muslim for long. Islam, like many faiths, does not only suggest a spiritual path to deliverance, but it also enjoins the believer to certain daily rituals, one of which is to eat only halal meat. In the Harlem of the 1950s, it was not easy to find a Muslim butcher, so many of the Muslims bought their meat from kosher stores. The alternative was the Indian stores opened up by Bengali immigrants from East Pakistan, what became Bangladesh in 1971. So he just goes on, and it's just you know. So I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's inaccurate. I just thought it was an interesting emphasis I had never focused on before.
No, I'm just joking. I just found it hilarious.
And then the same thing on the next page. In fact, Nation of Islam founder Elijah Muhammad's closest ideological ally, formerly outside of the nation, was Pakistani immigrant Abdul Basit Naeem. I don't know. Closest ideological ally, I don't know, maybe. I just don't remember reading about that. I don't remember that being a focus in Elijah's work. But or in his newspaper writings and all this. But
Mm,
what I do find interesting is, again, it's a different emphasis. So when I would have
right.
read these histories of Malcolm and others growing up in a very diverse New York, or other people growing up in a very diverse other environment. Well, he didn't grow up in New York, but when he moved to New
Right.
York, evolving, I should say,
Mm,
in these very diverse spaces, it's it as I'm remembering, or as certainly as I interpreted at the time, was mostly to understand what helped inform and galvanize a form of Black nationalism. That
right.
the
Right.
diversity they were experiencing wasn't this, and I get Prashad's point.
Right.
It wasn't an internationalist engagement that was, mutually fertilizing one another. It was, oh, I see this group seems to have a cohesion that
Mm,
we don't have enough of. We need to emulate that.
right. Right.
And so, but yeah, and to Big Pun's joke about I think the truth is far away. Prashad talks about the Nation of Islam and Malcolm being
Mm,
influenced and Elijah being influenced by people from, including Fard Muhammad, from
the
parts
East.
east.
Yeah.
And but again, even as I was reading that, I was like, yeah, my whole life there have been questions and discussions and jokes about the phenotype of Ward Fard Muhammad, and this,
Mm,
this idea that Prashad somewhat talks about, that
right.
in this very Black nationalist organization focused almost exclusively on phenotype, melanin, pigmentation, race,
Right.
that their central, guiding light figure was someone very
Mm,
ambiguous
right.
in his look. It had always been, but again, it was not, as I experienced it, in the context of the context was, he's this weird guy that informs a very Black
Mm,
organization. It wasn't, let's look at the internationalism of it. Let's look at the
right.
East's impact on Muhammad and the nation and all of that. At least as far, it was always, yes, we recognize. And then again, even when Farrakhan tried to make that push to make the nation recognized within global
Mm,
Islam, the global Islamic community, it was still done with this idea that the Black man
right. Right.
was returning to his rightful place on the world
Right. Right.
stage, not the world was we were part of this world.
Right.
and
Right.
and so yeah, I just thought that, again, the emphasis was, to me, I'm not even saying this critically, I'm just saying fascinating and different, and it did cause me to circle a lot, and I have a lot. I was just like, wow, 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 wow.
Oh, I said
But
the same
yeah.
thing. I'm agreeing with. I'm just joking, but I'm trying to do the whole game that certain people do, like Zionists, but like, don't erase me, don't erase my history. It's like, I start appropriating everything. Like, don't erase the Nation of Islam from what it means to me. You're just sitting there like, what? But
But I
I just
mean, but I'm also acknowledging that I just had never considered it.
right.
So it may very well be that Prashad is doing, did important work in this book of reminding people like me that there is a world outside of what you're seeing.
Right.
So I
Right.
did have a little bit of that as I was reading it, even as I admit I had some struggles with some of it.
Right. I mean, for me, it's the same, but I also was just like, I was more taken in and not, well, I was unsurprised only because from the angle of X and Garvey, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Because they seem like, it's funny because I learned about Garvey through Rutgers, and I haven't dug enough into the UNIA stuff, only through friends. And I think there's a new book coming out. Maybe we could tackle sometime. It's called The Case Against Black Nationalism. It's a book that's coming out by, I think, Paul Prescott. Not going to say anything else. I think it's worth looking into, and it's about Garveyism. So I think I sent it to
Oh
you.
man,
I think I sent the link to. I think I sent the link to you, Paul Prescott. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Paul. I know, and
yeah, he's a smart guy.
he's not. My issue is not that people are dumb. It's that
Right.
I
Right. Right.
disagree
Right.
with their arguments. And
Yeah.
Paul, I forgot what it was now. He had, because I didn't put the dots together, but he and I had both been on the Brianna Joy Gray show together at one point.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I remember the name was familiar, but it didn't click until he acknowledged that he was working with a Jacobin, and I have a heavy bias against that publication.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
um, I was
Sorry.
just like, yeah. But then I did read something from him that I can't remember, but I was like, wow, because I disagreed with it. But but I'll at least say this: I don't as yet have him in. This is messed up. I'm saying this. I don't have him as yet in the Shatz category of I don't want to read it at all.
Right,
I've
right,
read
right,
enough
right.
and I don't want to read it at all.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
but I do suspect that I would have a lot of disagreements with what he has to say about Garvey and Black nationalism.
Well,
Uh
there's a new. Well, this
yeah,
is
I'm
kind of
almost
diversion.
sure. I can't imagine he's going to say what I would agree. I mean, because I don't agree with his approach to socialism and Marxism. So I'm not
Right.
going to agree with his criticism of Black nationalism.
He.
But I'll read it.
Yeah, I'll
I'll
read it
read
too.
it.
I was actually think. I think I may have sent. I would be down to read it too because I like. I just like. I'm past the phase of getting too upset. Other than if you're like really being covering up for awful things like Zionism or colonialism because of all the health stuff I've had and just life is so. There's a lot of also other things going on like the genocide. So I'm like whatever. So I would be happy to read that. Also, I think he did say. Um, he wrote some. Oh, there's been like I think he's part of the new. There's like a renewal or fascination with Bayard Rustin as well. That was
Mm-hmm.
part of that milieu, and there's limits to that
Mm-hmm.
and understandings of that because
Oh, I have
whatever.
problems with that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But there's like I think that's where it's coming from because like you're explaining like there is a sort of sense of like we need to do real politics and real politics is like not engaging as much but not engaging as much with the internationalism of it all and having these steps towards something else. So I think that's something worth thinking, but with this book in mind too. So for me when I was reading this stuff it was not surprising only because I was like yeah, black folks, they're engaging with brown folks. Not, I don't know how much brown folks engage with black folks anymore, but that's happening. So I was like, okay, that's cool. And I was like really engaged. But the only thing I was really amazed by was the Bengali stuff. I was like, this is crazy. This is too many. I think that's too many. Like, I don't know if that's, it's just too many. I don't know if that's like the only thing I know is from Bengali Horror in the book by Vivek Bald is that a lot of, again, it's everything is material. So it created all these folks who were trained to be bureaucrats and there was not enough jobs to give them. Because at one point, Vijay Prashad does bring up a really valid point about Korean Americans too, where he says, in some cases, materially, when Korean Americans or Koreans are leaving South Korea because there's not enough work or jobs and the development of it, the military obnoxiousness of it, the U.S. government, just like with certain other immigrants, certain like Venezuelans who are leaving and Cubans, they will find ways to placate to a degree because it is a sort of racial bribe, as Deepa Iyer would have said, which is, but it's material. So I like that part, and that's where it
I
came to
love that
mind.
part.
Yeah, that made
And when he
sense to
talks about
me.
Koreans replacing Jews who move up the
Yes,
ladder into
yes,
whiteness and leave the city, I was like, that's where I was like in my notes, like this is where I want our project to go. Like
right,
this is
right,
and build from
right,
and add to and lane I want us to run in
right.
because um uh but that said, I mean, what I'm stuck on is that said, I am moved by how much I just don't know
Yeah, yeah,
about all these other communities.
right.
So I appreciate what he did here, even where I might have an issue here or there, or have a joke about the Bengali colored glasses he was wearing when he was writing it and all of that. Because it would be funny to like even just now I'm thinking it would be funny to go back and tell the history of famous movements and figures through the lens of someone else not always associated. Like if like
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
But
It's
a
like
lot of them.
yeah. Go ahead.
No, I didn't mean like, but I was saying the Vivek Baldwin. For a lot of Bengali folks, they did sort of become like not Koreans exactly, they're heavily colonized and different. But a lot of them got on these boats, British boats, on purpose to leave, and their whole plan was to jump off the boats once they're nearby. So there is that history. Yeah. So if you read that book, Bengali Harlem, a lot of them just jumped. Like their whole plan was to leave British India at that point by the 10s and 20s, because that was when it was getting better and worse. Like you can tell the tides are turning, but that's when the British really clamping down, because in 1917 the Bolsheviks rise up and they open their doors to everyone pretty much to learn what they learned and come back. Right.
Mm.
So they were creating this, they're trying to funnel out again. The British Empire did do these very mercurial things of like, well, we'll give them more now jobs on the sea. But they didn't understand that these men are like, I don't like you. So when they got close to the shore, they jumped. And of course, with the fact that they're people of color, a lot of them are darker sometimes. I mean, Bengalis like me are a little bit lighter skinned, but then you have also my grandfather who was looked extremely light skinned. But I think some of us are Persian, a little bit identified in ancestry. But for most Bengalis, there is a little bit of a shade, like brown, like we're brown. And so they mixed in with black Harlemites and other folks. So you'll find their ancestors today. I don't mean to, but there is a book to write about that. So when I was reading this, there is a book that's coming up. It was published way after Prashad's, where he goes into archival work, talking about Louisiana too. There's a lot of Indian Bengalis who jumped off the boat, went to Louisiana, and they started to do very Orientalist games. Like they would actually pretend to be, what's that thing? Not wizards, but fortune tellers. And they would do that to make money. Yeah. So that was really funny too, because they did that in the book. They were like, they were just like playing up that whole Orientalist game, and some African American folks
yoga instructors.
Yes,
is that yeah, it's like
before all the white people took that over. So it was like funny that way.
You can only have but something for so long before the whites come in and take it. So
that's true. IT jobs and everything else.
IT job. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I have a personal family thing happening right now around that.
Oh,
too.
okay.
So yeah. It's not
I
good
didn't mean,
either.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
No, it's all good. It's just so. All right, let me just. So if you don't mind, I'll just. There's a couple things I'll just quickly throw out as talking points that I thought were very interesting about the book. So as I said, my first point was that we just need tricontinentalism and Marxism, because it is pretty clear that is his critique of. I mean, I really do like what he does in the book, and were we to, if we were to take our project into full book form.
Ooh, that'd be amazing.
I do think this book gives us sort of a method for how to do it, because I really like how he starts. I mean, the book starts with how does he do this exactly? Because he does first. He goes into like it's a look internationally. He talks the strange career of xenophobia.
Yeah,
and then he goes into. The second chapter is the American ideology. Right? I didn't skip anything, right?
No.
Yeah. Chapter 2 is American ideology, where it's like this global xenophobic phenomenon is microcosmed by him in the United States to give a sort of brand that it takes up here. And then he talks, and I like the way he talks about how this country, the United States, dealt with and evolved this American ideology of neoliberalism as a mechanism to safely bring in all these people from all around the world and essentially turn them into Americans. And by that meaning, accepting all of the worldview, the racial hierarchy, religion, etc. And it reminded me of this book we read in grad school by Elizabeth Hale called The Invention of Whiteness. And how this country constructed whiteness over time and evolved it over time in response. And it's in many ways, I think, another way of it may be a U.S. centered, more of a U.S. centered focus than Prashad's, but on making the same point that what we see evolve is here, at least, is particular and is a form of what happens everywhere,
right?
That is, every community has to deal with various forms of diversity, how diversity is defined, and then how is that diversity going to ultimately be used to evolve and defend whatever ruling elite in whatever society we're talking about. But in this country, there was a specific form of that I think Prashad talks about, that I thought was really, if not, I don't know that I agree with everything he says about how he constructs this, but I really think it's important how he does it. then he goes into he has another chapter on the specifics of chapter 3, Coolie Piranha, talking
Mhm.
about the racialization of various Asians. And then chapter 4, The Merchant is Always a Stranger, which is, I think, again, as we've said, the centerpiece for me for our work. And then that's it. So, but I think that in a very short, relatively short book, he does a lot.
Yeah, does a lot.
So the other thing I thought that was really important, that I thought was fascinating, again, and I don't always know that I agree, but I was really impressed because he starts talking about a lot of names. I mean, in many ways, it was like a reunion tour for my own educational process. Like, I don't know. I think maybe Prashad and I are of very similar age, maybe. I don't know. But so, for instance, when he talks about, he gives what I note here is an important review of the 1980s and 90s and some of the movements, including his look into Afrocentricity. I mean, he's mentioning, first of all,
Diop.
All right, so Afrocentricity. So he's talking about people like Runoko Rashidi, Molefi Asante. Those are the two names that I noted off the top, but I think there were several others. And these are people that I've met, studied.
Wow.
I mean, intensely.
Right.
Runoko Rashidi, I was just reminded for the memoir project. Runoko Rashidi, I referenced him all the time. He gave this lecture years and years ago about Africans and science. And he starts this lecture by talking about, and it's apocryphal. I'm clearly apocryphal, but I forgot how. But he's telling the story about these who was he talking about? But they were African warriors at the time that King Arthur's Round Table would have been.
Oh, damn. Okay.
And he's telling this story of these amazing African warriors, and of course, as Prashad talks about with Rashidi, their beautiful, radiating dark skin, and their and then he describes one of King Arthur's, maybe Arthur himself, coming through and meeting them, and I forgot how he does it, but Arthur's men says to this African warrior something like, "What are you doing? What are you out here for? What are you, And the African warrior says, "I'm in a search for my father." And Rashidi's point was to talk about how many of us come into this pursuit of African-centered, Afrocentric work and Black study in pursuit of our absent Black fathers. And I had to admit that at that time in particular, because it was shortly after the passing of my father, that I was like, I almost maybe broke into tears at the time. I don't know. It was powerful because I was like, he's talking to me.
Right.
And it was conscious for me that was absolutely what I was doing at the time. I was absolutely in a personalized racial pursuit for my father and going into all these histories. So to see Prashad bring it up and then be critical of it, I admit I was like, God damn it. But I'm not to say I don't know that he's entirely wrong.
Right.
But it made me, I had to, I was like, I struggled with it. He does also give credit and speak. He's not all critical. He's saying that they have some good points. I understand what they're doing, but he says that they get ultimately too much into this whole, essentializing of race,
right?
And wanting to and connects them to some, I believe, also Bengali scholars who are ultimately doing the same thing. They're saying we're all African.
Right. Well, he was talking about Dalits too.
Dalits, that's right.
They're like Dalit folks. Like, because the thing is, King. I also wrote some points. Like, well, I want to touch really quickly on his critique of multiculturalism, neoliberal multiculturalism.
So real quick, before you do that, because that's let me just read off because that's one of the things. Because I said that my other point was the state's emancipation from internal contradictions through multiculturalism. So on page 58, we can come back to that because I
right.
I think I largely agree with anyway, but that was something I just brought it. For me, he gets into, there's a brilliant part where he talks about that I think we should come back to, particularly for our project and even in this discussion, when he talks about Linda Harrison's criticism of Black capitalism.
Oh, right. Where was that?
So he goes into this whole thing of, as I interpret it, look, there are all of these histories and struggles with all of these communities with colonialism, capitalism, white supremacy, and figuring out who they are, where they relate, how they engage one another. And then he takes a moment to point out, and there were these people who were saying this Black capitalism thing that you're trying to impose on us is some nonsense. So I was like, and then my last point, just that I noted here, was that I think he does too much to project polyculturalism, which is his,
I wrote that down
onto Garvey, Malcolm, etc. And then back to my first point, he seems to conflate radical internationalism or revolutionary nationalism with polyculturalism. And I'm not sure I'm right about that, but that was a thought I was having, that instead of writing a book about the value of radical internationalism or revolutionary nationalism, radical internationalism or revolutionary nationalism, which I think are largely the same thing, he promotes this polyculturalism argument, ultimately in defense of the Marxist approach to global relations. So, all right, but those are just some of the. But go ahead, we can come back. So you wanted to talk about his. You
just
said you had a
briefly.
criticism of multiculturalism, yeah.
Oh no, the thing that brought to mind, because I'm actually, so on Millennials Killing Capital, I'm supposed to come back to talk to the other Jared about the representations of the intellectual by Edward Said, and I have this whole list of books here. And then also I suggested we go through the Tyler Austin Harper article, because everything that's going down with the letter again, with the Iran letter, it does expose some interesting. I think right now it's a good time to talk about intellectuals. So I think on the 8th, I'm going to be on Millennials doing that. So, but anyway, since I'm preparing for it with the Tyler Austin Harper one, which I printed, I got like a free subscription for like 30 days. I'm going to, unsubscribe from the Atlantic. But what brought to mind was like Vijay Prashad, like Tyler Austin, not to make shots, I feel like I'm going after people who are not really included, but it did bring to mind Tyler Austin Harper's article, only in that Vijay Prashad, even though he has his own things we can critique, and other lefties, real lefties, in my opinion, do a better job of really explaining it, what they're against, in a shorter period of time, because he only briefly mentions it, versus the Harper article, which I'm still reading, which is really just quote unquote worried about wokeness, worried about this or that, doesn't want to have MLK Day or something on him, versus Prashad, who's actually kind of arguing, I think, well, what we deserve is something about diversity. So that's not the issue. What we're getting is not that, which I think is a different critique than what I've seen from Harper and others who are kind of more anti-woke, and we don't need any DEI, or we don't need any like real ethnic studies. We just need to do real work. And I think that's the only thing I wanted to bring up, was I think his argument for why neoliberal multiculturalism is bad was stronger. So all this to say, the Atlantic is printing stuff that people have written before, which is not surprising, and I think that argument to me was missing from how some people talk about anti-wokeness now. So that's why I wanted to briefly just give a positive.
Well, you're talking about this is the guy, right? Tyler Austin.
Yeah,
Harper,
the one he did a video on. Yeah,
he wanted to be the irreplaceable Negro.
Right. And he talked about it's funny because he's a nice enough guy. I actually know him through Twitter. I've shared pieces I've written with him. But when I read that article with you, I'm reading it now on my own. But when you're going through it, then I read this book. I thought, okay, this is the kind of critique I'd appreciate more of, where it's like, neoliberal. What we get is not even multiracialism or diversity. What we get is neoliberal counterinsurgency versus what some people are writing, in my opinion, about how wokeism is not good, which is not the right approach, which gives into the right wing attacks. There's no real wokeism. Like, I'm just confused over how that's happening.
Again, white folks took what black people were using as an internal inspirational chant call to be woke, to stay
Yeah.
woke, and they've turned it into some MAGA reactionary,
Dog whistle.
nonsensical dog whistle. So yeah.
Yeah.
Real quick, Silberg. Is this the same Eric King? Is this Eric King Watts? Because I have a major issue. I have a standing issue. Eric King Watts is publishing a book on a collection of writings on political prisoners. God damn. Because this is the dude first of all, Eric King, is that the same dude? I need to double check that. Because if that's the same dude, he and I years ago had a back and forth over an article. When he was the head of some journal, Todd and I were submitting an article to. He would not publish this article because his argument was, and I happen to be wearing my Mumia t-shirt, one of my Mumia t-shirts today. The article was about how Mumia engaged and deployed the internal colonialism thesis in his work. And Eric King Watts, in a back and forth over several emails with me, continued to argue that our article did not do enough to demonstrate the internal colonial argument, and that Mumia used it, even as I was quoting him, Mumia, that is, using it in his discussions of police brutality. So I couldn't believe that he wouldn't publish the article. Because again, the point isn't that you have to agree with every single thing a person is saying in an article. The point is, does it meet a peer review sort of standard for making an argument? So to say that we were not making the argument, I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. So, and it wasn't like his argument at the time was not, let me defend my point because you're not doing enough to do justice on it for this political prisoner.
Right.
It felt very much like, I don't want to be involved with publishing a conversation about a political prisoner.
Right.
I was like, wow. So now if he's doing that work, and great, that's wonderful, and this exchange is irrelevant. It is irrelevant anyway. But I'm not gonna lie. I was like, I have never gotten over that, never forgotten that. Because it was really one of the few times I had that kind of response from a journal.
Right.
Like, what do you mean we didn't explain enough? So anyway, but salute to his work doing, if he's doing political prisoner publishing, that's great. I was like, but damn. And that article, that we never got that artitle published either. Now that I think about it. Yeah, shit was dope. No, Todd and I had a dope article. That was dope.
It's just funny how you're like, this guy, respect to his work. That's how I feel. That's what my partner says all the time. When I lead, when I go even more quiet, I do the opposite what you do. I lead first, like, that's a nice person. They seem really nice. And she's like, why are you so quiet? And I'm like, but listen, he's the dumbest person I've ever heard. Like, it was like crazy stuff. She's like, so I go quiet and then I bridge out. So I appreciate that.
It's like, man,
I know. That's hilarious. I think you were saying it's not the same guy, though, unfortunately.
I'm so angry. What did I miss in the chat? Did somebody explain this to me? My bad. And Sudip, I really don't mean to
no.
Because you don't deserve to be associated with my nonsense.
I don't think it's nonsense, but I think it's not the same guy.
It's not the same guy. All right, my bad. Oh, Eric King is a white anarchist, former political prisoner. All right, my bad. Eric King is not Eric King Watts then. Okay, good. Is that what we're saying? Okay, good. So. I'm happy to be wrong. I'm happy. But I crashed out. Sorry about that, everybody. Sorry about that.
I mean, I've had my moments with actually Tyler Austin Harper. He co-hosts a podcast with another guy, Jay Caspian King, who I still really like for his work, because his podcast and his other work is pretty solid. But he wrote this book called The Loneliest Americans, which is about Asian American stuff. And I wrote a really kind of challenging review of his book because it was a very odd book. So I had a crash out about him a while ago because I remember seeing his book in Barnes and Noble. You know how they leave some books on the side thing with the person like, you should read this, and this is about Asian Americans. Like, this is not about Asian Americans. This is
Well,
about one man's like
we
problems
just
about
had
being
this
Asian.
conversation. I was walking with my daughter, and we were talking about this, and I didn't tell her who I was talking about, and I won't say it here either because they're in the
Right.
chat. But someone in our chat right now had referred to a book that had come out somewhat recently, and the way and their summary of when asked about the book, their summary response was, it's an airport bookstore book, which I don't think they probably phrased it better, but the point
right.
being that is a condemnation.
Right,
Like,
right.
books at an airport bookstore are generally, by my humble opinion, considered to be the lowest form of, like, you're not going to find critical thinking work at the airport.
Right.
So when you see, like, similarly, I see that way, like Barnes, like what is at the window at Barnes and Nobles
Yeah.
is going to be, it's like, and I was like, I said,
I would be interested. I'll send you
coldest. If anyone ever said that, you could say anything about something I've written, but if anybody ever said, man, Jared, that shit should have been in the airport bookstore, I'd have been like, God damn it, we might have to fight. We might have to step outside.
Sorry, I'm gonna just share the review I did because I think it'd be fine to maybe, because this book will come into our work, I think, because it's a very, very, very recent. This is the first time I'm joining the chat, so hopefully it works. Shoot, I don't know how to.
Man, I would be.
Hold on.
I do have too many beasts, but they're not real beasts. But while Sudip is looking for this, because this comes up all the time. It's that I don't think I have more beefs than most people. I am more open about them than a lot of people, I think, are.
Right.
And I think a lot of the beefs are because I do have that personality trait of, if we disagree, I want it to be known. And we can, and that's the same with friends, loved ones, and etc. And it doesn't always go well. And I don't always do it right. And then I have my own personality flaws as well. But yeah, I am that. All right, so you want me to pull this up here?
Yeah,
I got it.
Do you mind it? I mean, you don't have to read it. This is something we're gonna, I think, maybe have to just reference, because it was a very recent book by someone about Asianness, the Loneliest Americans, and that was my review of it. I wasn't really a fan of the book, and just saying, like, there are these books that exist that I also I did crash out about in my own way, where I was like, I don't understand how this was published. I don't understand what the purpose of the book was. The book was basically suggesting that Asian Americans, should reject being Asian too, because that's too disjointed. This is why I sometimes respond to you, not saying you're making, but when people say like disarticulate or disaggregate, that's why I get like a little bit of a simmering, like my ears start ringing, because I hear also other people who say we're not even a real group, so no one says Asian anymore. So in fact, his answer was, let's say immigrant. And I wrote in a book, I was like, well, doesn't that confuse who is also immigrant or not? Like, there's Asian immigrants who will face something materially different from Asian Americans like me. Like, there's an actual institutional thing that affects people differently if you're an immigrant or non-immigrant. So it was a confusing text, in my opinion, but this is something I think we're going to have to refer to, because this only got published a couple of years ago. It's very recent. And in the scheme of how people interact with Asian Americanness, this book was supposed to be, it got reviewed at a ton of places, and the writer himself was a former New York Times writer. So he has an access to a public that a lot of Asian American scholars don't have, like scholars. So just really quickly, the book that I prefer is Erica Lee's book, The Making of Asian America, which I always refer for my students. So you see, again, what you're arguing, you see the book that's taken up about Asian American, it becomes more confusing because the book was very personal and very confusing. And then you have a scholar book like The Making of Asian America by Harvard professor, I believe, Erica Lee. That is obviously relatively popular, but not like that. So to me, that was I just brought up to also segue through your emotions about Eric. So I wanted to also, I've been there too.
Yeah,
with
no,
some
thank you.
people,
I
yeah.
appreciate it. And I put the link to that review in the show description if people want to check it out. And I
It
likely
was
will later as well.
it was
so.
fun because I did interview a political scientist for it. I did do my own political, and I also interviewed some Asian American real activists and organizers, and it deals with class and all these other issues. Like with the book, for instance, with him talking about the merchant class, I did like the emphasis on class. So like the way that people talk. So like for me though, there's like two binaries where there's still two dangers where some Asians will take that and be like, well, in that case, yeah, it's totally class. We are treated exactly the same as black folks class wise. I don't agree with that either. I do think it's a multi-tiered I don't know what it is. Oh wait, I don't know what that is. It's a multi-tiered uh analysis, which I think he has foundations of. Like one, when we see Asian American merchants, that does represent privileges that Asians get that black folks do not. Same with Jews, European, and whatnot, which was the institutional stuff he mentions, right? For every black person who tried to open a business, they were attacked, killed, unfortunately, in the South, even in other areas. For someone like an Asian, that did happen, but then you had places like in the West Coast where we were able to form communities because it was a little bit safer. But so what I appreciate is him. So what I'm saying is that Asian Americans have more of a class privilege than African Americans at large, but there are Asian American, but class does exist. So that's the way I come at it, and I think that's informational. And with that book, with the cat, again, I actually do like his podcast. I think I think if he hears this, I just want to come out and say I still think good job for writing the book, but I did feel that book also was really weird because it was also presenting Asians and in the other way, which is Asians are all like white adjacent, which I also don't think is real. Like you have black folks who are generals, but they're still black. So that's the way I'm also, you know what I mean? So I think the colonialism argument works because in India, like a lot of the army was Punjabis and other groups who would feel tethered to the system because they were getting something. They didn't lose their Indianness. That was the reason why they were there, was to suggest, like the British were putting them purposely, hey, look, we're not really occupying you. You got your brothers and spoil your brothers here who are like you. So it's a thing that I feel like sometimes Asian Americans get trapped with, even when people are well-meaning. Although this book, I'm going to be honest again, do not read this. The Loneliest Americans. Read first The Making of Asian America by Erica Lee. That deserves a lot more praise. Then read his book, because you'll see a historian take on Asianness, which is far more nuanced and quite beautiful about our experiences. And then you'll read his book, which is very cynical, in my opinion. So, and of course, read the review. But I just wanted to go off your also legitimate grievances against certain people, because I think with King, he also refused to listen to Asian American scholars telling him, why didn't you, because his book is very thin on history as well, even though it's talking about Asian Americans. So it's very bizarre. So I didn't mean to, but yeah. So with this book, with Vijay Prashad, again, I think he actually is doing a better job in a few more chapters and some of the more recent texts we've gotten and more of the recent discussions we've gotten about Asian and African American political relationships and economic relationships.
And I can definitely appreciate Prashad's sort of worldview or frame, even if I don't fully agree with it, but I can appreciate that as I said, I think he's ultimately trying to say we need Marxism and revolutionary internationalism or something to that effect.
Right.
And that's, I agree. But I do have some issues, like I was trying to find exactly where so for instance, in that chapter 4, I think it's in chapter 4, where he's trying to make this point about the world Malcolm X. Yeah, so it says on page 111, and so for instance, like last year, when I did that 100th birthday celebration for Malcolm, I went back and read Jan Caroux's book, or at least heavy chunks of it. And to see Jan Caroux pop up in Prashad's book, only so that Prashad can talk about the East Indian influence on Malcolm, is part of what I'm saying is the flaw here.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you read Jan Caroux's book, it's not that Prashad is misrepresenting anything here. It's just the emphasis is, I think, if you read Caroux's book, you're not going to walk away with it.
Right.
The emphasis isn't oh, Malcolm, you know, was impressed that what is he saying here uh so born of a Grenadian mother, Louise Little, Malcolm would have known, as did his brother Wilfred, of one of his cousins who was an aide to Garvey and who visited the Littles often. I'm sure from the way he looked, Wilfred told Jan Carew, that he must have had some East Indian blood in him. On the trail of Louise Little's mother, Carew came upon a venerable matriarch who told him that she once heard of Malcolm's grandmother, who must have had some Coolie blood in her, or Carib in addition to her tar brush. End quote. And then the next line, Prashad says, as he lay in the arms of Yuri Kochiyama in 1965, Malcolm rested in a tradition that respected the complexity of his heritage and of the kind of politics he had moved towards. And I as I think of Malcolm now, I cannot take this image out of my head, nor can I forget those Bengali grocers, Aladdin's father and his friends, as he taught them about racism in the United States, as they taught him about halal. These are memories of genuine polycultural practice. And I'm sorry that I was like, you've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. That you're talking about Malcolm shot to pieces, laying on the floor, and the focus is that his head is in Yuri Kochiyama's lap. And of course, she's there, not, I think, representing some broad-based pan-Afro-Asian unity. She's there because she's a radical, brilliant revolutionary. She didn't bring all of Asia with her. You know what I'm saying? It was like, so she's there, and it's in the context of a Black nationalist, pan-Africanist meeting and hostilities and the state's involvement, et cetera.
Right.
So the way that Prashad is framing all of this, it's like, yeah, Carew and them mentioned, obviously there's all these discussions of race and complexity, and Black people are constantly, I got Indian in my family, or so-and-so was from the Caribbean, or so-and-so. But to frame it as it's not a Black-centered experience, is like, so anyway, I just thought that was...
No, the thing that was funny is like, not funny, but like the thing interesting, I saw that I circled to I was like, damn, again, like with the grocers, because I don't think, because I'm just like, I don't think that was running, like, not to be very crude about it, I don't think it was running through anyone's mind at that moment, like about the one grocer guy. So that was a little bit bizarre. And I also think with the Yuri, this is the thing that I think was kind of missing, although it kind of came up occasionally with the Guyana piece, which I found was his strength, like talking about Guyana, talking about the material separation between Indo-Guyanese and Afro-Guyanese, and how they kind of fought and pit against each other. But this one too was interesting because, again, with Malcolm, like you're saying, whenever you read his speeches, he always was international, but it was always about Afro-Americans, African-Americans, Black folks learning tricks of the trade from, like, say, armed revolutions in Vietnam to do their own thing. It wasn't like you're saying, him saying, well, I'm not really Black, I'm actually a little East Indian too. It's like, I don't think that was the part I thought was like, I don't know, you don't. But the other interesting, why not go with Yuri Kochiyama? Like, why don't you plug in Yuri Kochiyama's story and explain how what she was thinking? Because she was the thing is that she was a Black nationalist. Like, she became pretty much an honorary member of the new African Republic and all these things. So she was there, not like you're saying exactly. She was not there as a purview of this. It's internationalism, but not in the way he's trying to have it. It's more like, I, as a Japanese American, have learned a lot from this Black guy who I really, really appreciate, coming to my apartment for non-nuclear, and then becoming friends with him. And that's all real. But I was thinking we could have focused on her and seen her, because in my mind, it's like what you're saying. This is an example of a form of Black nationalism that inherently is itself coalitional. I think that's the way to look at it versus polyculturalism. Because when I was thinking about the later chapters with the Young Lords and Black Panther Party, there's a great book by historian Sonia Songha Lee, which talks about the community control movement of the 50s. And she said there was such a dialectical thing going on with even these young people. They were so young and so bright, the Young Lords. They would be like, we will practice our beliefs about freeing Puerto Rico from a distinctly colonial situation, but we are also building into a more coalitional mindset of colonized people. But they're not. It's not polyculturalism. They still kept to themselves about certain things that they do. I'm entering the space as a colonized Puerto Rican, same as a Black Panther
Right,
Party.
right,
I'm entering
right.
this space as a internally colonized Black person. So that's the thing I was thinking he could have said with Yuri, because to me, Yuri Kochiyama is fascinating because, again, she was an honorary member of a lot of these things going on. She was considered to be that one person, a one Asian non-Black face. I would have thought you could go with her and see how she's thinking. I'm entering this space as a Japanese American ally, comrade to a form of Black nationalism that itself is coalitional and beneficial to everyone. I think I haven't read Jay Sakai's work yet, which I will, but listening to Jared Ware and Nick Estes, because I was listening to their Jared Sakai because I might read it for the first time. They talked about how Jared Sakai too, like he's a Japanese American, he entered spaces understanding that for his mind, the struggle for liberation for all was a struggle for Black folks in the South and other parts. So that's what I was thinking would be. I get what Vijay Prashad is trying to do, but that was a stretch. And I don't think that is kind of the tradition he's thinking at that moment. And then one last thing about, and I want to go into the Guyana thing because I thought that was
Yeah.
where it really sung. But the one thing that also was interesting to me about all this had to do with, actually I forgot, I'll come back to it. But there was one thing that I also had, not a slight criticism, but actually a little bit, like, oh yeah, so the Marxism and tricontinentalism and but the thing is the anti-colonialism needs to be there too, because the French Communist Party, even though it was founded by Ho Chi Minh, the French Communist Party was quite cowardly and silly when it came to being against French colonialism in Algeria. I think if I'm correct, and someone could correct me, because I'm now reading this book called I have all these books I'm teaching those online classes. A Savage War of Peace by Alistair Horn. This one right here, which is a great book. It's about it's by New York Review of Books. It's very it's talking about the Algerian War of Independence and how violent it was. But you'll see the French Communist Party was quite late to the party. They actually, I think, took part in de Gaulle's different republics to keep Algeria as a. All I'm saying is that communism is important. As much as I'm a Marxist-Leninist, that's important. But the anti-colonialism is very important. If you don't have that, even communism can become itself just a party to silly politics that intentionally are not really coalitional. Yeah. So for me, I found some value in the book, to be honest with you. But I also found the anti-colonialism part is something that just needs to be really, really highlighted, because you can have forms of social, it was the British Labour Party that was very much indoctrinated and complicit in the concentration camps in not in South Africa, in Kenya. So yeah, this is something to think about. But yeah, Guyana to me is, what's the word? Guyana, the chapter he did on Guyana was really important. I think it was the Cooley chapter, and that is chapter 3. So he does talk about Guyana. He does reference Walter Rodney's work, which was I think his dissertation on class and colonialism in Guyana. So he does talk about all that, which is amazing. And he also mentions how there were these real tensions materially between Afro-Guyanese who had been quote unquote freed from enslavement, chattel slavery, and then following that, you had again, East Indians and North Indians, Bengalis too, being recruited, let's say, and compelled to leave India to become the indentured servants for Guyana's plantations that still exist. And he talks about the history of how this economic situation, which I love, pitted these groups against each other. And if people don't know a little bit about Guyana, Chedi Jagan was the first democratically elected prime minister. He was Indo-Guyanese. His wife was white, I think English, but he was a Marxist, and he was very close. He was a Soviet person. He was close to Cuba. He was overthrown by a person that was allegedly to his right, but still a black nationalist, by Burnham, who took over from him and then led this very racialized sort of very similar to Duvalier, saying there's a black cultural nationalism, but ultimately was anti-communism. That's why it was allowed to survive. So I thought that was a strong chapter, because to me, I think Guyana is like such an interesting test case of what happens when you have very large, significant groups of the global majority, but you also still have questions about how they've entered their own exploitation materially in different ways. So I'm very fast. And also, so again, someone grew up in Queens. That's like Guyanese central. Like there's a lot. We had Indo-Guyanese neighbors who were Christian, but they themselves also would show us their little trinkets about Hinduism. Like Guyana is a very interesting place. I've never been, but knowing a lot of Guyanese people growing up, even the ones who are Christian are very, very much like they have Hindu backgrounds. So it's like a very interesting, almost Santeria approach to religion. And then you also have a lot of Afro-Guyanese too. And then the Indo-Guyanese look mixed. It's just a fascinating culture. And I'm very, very interested by it. So yeah.
All I can say is outside of Walter Rodney, I've never been to the country, but one of
Right.
my, one of the favorite people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting once upon a time was from there. So
Mm.
if nothing else, Guyana, you can at least rest assured you produced someone I liked. So thank you. No, first of all, I like, again, I don't want to overdo it with any criticism. I actually, because I like what Prashad has done here, and even in a kind of self-critique, I can almost understand, going back to the beginning, why he and others would be hesitant to include Black America or even reference to the United States at all in some of their work focused on global affairs, because of the tendency among some to overemphasize the U.S., overemphasize the Black American component of the African diaspora, and so I've maybe I could understand some of that, because what I do appreciate about Kung Fu fighting is, and this is why I was critical of the absence of Black America in Darker Nations, is because in Kung Fu fighting, Prashad does make the focus on Black America part of a global phenomena and reality that I do think is important. You know, I used to, you know, Dr. John Henrik Clarke used to, I think, importantly always point out that the goal is to replace African people back to their appropriate place in the world stage of civilization or something like that. And in terms of the microcosmic African America, I felt the same way. Like Black America is not just existing in this isolated,
right,
you know, a vacuum. It is, and what is happening in Black American struggles is very much connected to what's happening in the world. So that part I do appreciate about what Prashad is doing. And so when he's making these points that I want our project to pick up on and make more of an emphasis, that various Asian and, well, in this case, Asian communities are appearing in these Black adjacent spaces in the United States for very material reasons. He does make reference to immigration policy, for instance, that brings in certain populations. He talks about, I think he even uses the term redlining, that redistricts communities based on white supremacist, imperialist, colonialist guidelines.
Right.
And that very important point that I mentioned earlier, where he talks about the Korean replacing the Jew in terms of the merchants in the community. And then this question of, or the frame of the merchant as stranger, which I also think is really interesting. That the merchant, not just because of a racialized ethnic difference, but because of a class business difference in relationship to the community, is a stranger. And then even if I don't think he makes this point, but I would want to make the point that even if you wanted to make it an argument around Blackness, the idea that Black ownership of the same stores that are in Black communities, that some Black people make the argument should be Black owned and therefore overturn the relationships economically and otherwise, the idea that those Black merchants would stay in the same Black community and not themselves move out to the suburbs with whatever money they could make, or move into some other bougie or Black neighborhood. And in other words, this idea that the money that would be created would stay in that same impoverished community and wouldn't leave and become the stranger in terms of the class relationship is also part of the fantasy.
Right.
Like, like well, pick one. Pick an owner of a so-called successful black-owned business in the United States. They're not living in the hood. They're not positioning themselves to stay in the hood and struggle with the rest of their impoverished community. They're trying to get up out. And then
Right.
they use the language of my success is good for us all as part of the mythology.
Right.
And I do appreciate that he's saying that here, that even within, again, I don't think he makes this point explicitly, but even within Asian and Jewish communities, there's a class element.
Right.
So the merchant is a particular form of that group that you're interacting with, that sets the basis for that relationship. So I appreciated all of that
Right.
in the book. I absolutely, yeah. So I'll stop there. I just
No,
wanted to make those few points.
I just wanted to say, because like with the Asian American, like it's funny because having been around so many Asian American businesses and areas, living in Queens and Central Jersey, it doesn't also benefit Asian American. Like that's the thing about businesses. Unless you have mechanisms like maybe even a higher tax bracket, which is not existent in America. Like you have so many. Well, he mentioned the special economic zones pretty much. He's mentioned how there are these zones set up in certain areas. I think I was in Ferguson maybe a year after the uprising, maybe several months, and I went there and I just talked to people. I was planning to do a dissertation on Ferguson and some stuff, but then I didn't want to move to St. Louis, so I was like, no, this is too much. This is like, I know it's not the South, but I don't want to be here. So, but the thing is, I remember this because I could see Targets on the very edge of Ferguson, which is a suburb, and I could see Target and other bridges. So they're like these zones set up everywhere, which is a Clintonian thing too. Bill Clinton set up. He started the process like racial redistribution of goods, or racial addressment will come through the market, and therefore will encourage less taxes for these businesses to come in. So to your point, the businesses themselves don't have any real reason to, because at the end of the day, if you think about it, if an Asian owner of a business gets the money they have in an even Asian area, which I've been around growing up, there's no incentive for them nor structure for them, because of how governments run these days, to even give the money away. Like you said, like I don't understand what people expect, like, because the logic would be they would in turn give their money, invest their money, I guess, into public utilities, but that's not what they're incentivized to do. They just give their money to their own company so they can get better, get faster, get cleaner, get it more efficient, allegedly, and control the market, which is the whole monopoly situation, which is like what happens. So that's where I'm just always lost. Even if someone is it's like very much an argument with colonialism. Like even if you have a master who's smiles a little bit, maybe teaches you a certain thing about like, hey, you're Bengali, get on a ship, you can escape. It doesn't change the social relationship. And the same thing with the business owner. There's nice business owners, I'm sure. Like there's people who are nice, who maybe occasionally give more money to like a library or say certain things about Trump. It does not negate, though, the objective reality that what they're doing is not beneficial. It is taking up resources and it's dominating a public space where neoliberalism is back again, when instead we should have public utilities instead. Because at the end of the day, I don't care who's running. Well, I do care a little bit if they're too psycho about it. But if they're like a decent person running a store and the next COVID thing happens, it doesn't matter how that person treats me. I'm stuck buying stuff from them. And they can mark up things how they feel like, So to me, it's just annoying that way. And the thing about this book that I do appreciate is at least contextualizing that a bit. But yeah, the critique I have of this book slightly is I would have liked, again, weirdly, because he mentions a lot of Bengali people, Indian people, Pakistani people being part of these movements, which is I get. But Yuri Kochiyama, I go back to, like, there's certain people who I would have liked for the other approach, because I felt like the book is trying to argue against racial essentialism. I don't know if this is what Prashad is doing, because I actually really, really respect him. So if he watches this, please. But I was getting the feeling this book was kind of arguing to Black folks to not let go, but to like develop polyculturalism. I felt like at certain points it could have been, if you included Yuri Kochiyama, that would make it more of a balanced approach, to have now an argument to Asian folks, hey, you also benefit from the black folks. Like, to me, because the book was kind of referring, like, Malcolm X has a brown friend. Malcolm X has a brown butcher, is a brown guy who did his glasses. I don't know. And then, he's like, oh, maybe I'm not as black as I thought, and I'm East Indian. Whatever. That's not true. But the reverse approach would have been also more balanced. Like, what about an Asian person who's like, oh shit, I'm a person of color. Oh shit, I'm colonized. I'm part of this thing. Yori Kochiyama's experience really identifies that with me. He does mention that a little bit with the Red Guard in chapter 5 and Iroh Kwon, but then I would have wanted specific, because I think at least one more Asian person, a deep dive on them would have been more balanced. And I think when we write something together, I actually think a book would be great, because I do think we could tackle certain layers of this problem, because I wrote down what you said earlier, which I think would have been, which is like the lead into whatever we choose to do, because so this is real rebranding radicalism. So the couple of things, rebranding radicalism is the way I think is happening with the new form, because it's no more about like Afro and Asian folks don't mix it up. It's more like, let's learn from each other. Like, Asian Americans will learn how to be more politically motivated from African folks, and African folks and African Americans will learn about economics from Asian folks. So I do like that as the lead in. But the other thing I really wanted to say was the benefit of this book, but I think we could do it more of, even though I have some criticisms about the communism part, is like I think the anti-colonialism needs to be core. There is also, at least at the bare minimum, when people talk about solidarity these days, when I see it on like social media, the videos you showed me, even when people are meaningful about it, they talk about it like it's a new thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we need to start developing. That's where I have issues with, and that's where I think this book at least is handy on that regard. It's like, no. I know I keep repeating this ad nauseum, but there is a tradition that exists that is there. What you're living in is new. And how we're in this position is through repression of these movements, killing of the leaders, arresting of them, and then finally, to be honest, providing racial bribes to certain people in certain groups to then go out and do their business online too, because there's a whole infrastructure of online psyops. Because when I hear even people like being kind enough to say, oh, well, Asian business in the Mississippi Delta, they own businesses, so we have this legacy together, that's not enough to me. They're still merchants. I want us to refer to this legacy instead, which to me is stronger. The Ho Chi Minh legacy in Harlem, that's real. The fact that he was like couldn't sleep because he was so excited about Garvey and other things. That's the legacy. But I think with our book, it's like there's a rebranding of radicalism, which is also a cultural amnesia project of really our legacy together at the bare minimum. So that's all I wanted to say about that too.
No, I love all of that. I appreciate it. And there's a couple times where I felt like I said to myself, I would have to really read this book again more carefully to be more comfortable with my initial reaction, which I did feel at times the book is too focused on what Black people have gotten wrong in essentializing race and not anybody else. And then I did have that thing. It's like, this is another time you're telling Black people to give up their identity while no one else is doing that. So yeah, I did struggle with that.
That's how I felt. I just want to say that's really how I felt a little bit. Like, I appreciated all the Bengali grocers, like, oh, dope, whatever. But I was not that surprised, but I did at a certain level when he was mentioning Garvey had this editor who's Indian who talked to another Indian, and they were like, this is crazy what's going on with Black folks and the murders and stuff. I was like, fair, but it was like, I was like also like thinking to myself, but this still sounds like you're saying like Black folks, maybe it's unintentional, but Black folks, and this is something I have a problem with legitimately when people always argue against essentialism. I don't know if Paul Prescott says this yet. I haven't read it, but I feel like that's the vibe of his group, which is always about identity politics, but it's always from that lane of like, well, there's a Black person who there was a white guy. Did you know there was a white guy who did a thing and he liked Black people? It was 1818 or something random. It's like, okay, but that's not the norm of like the other issue of identity politics, which is white identitarianism. And that's the only issue I have with it, because I did feel like with the Malcolm X thing, again, he was entering his space as a Black radical, and people were entering in with him saying, oh, Black radicalism that you have offers me something. So, and I agree.
Look, there was another part somewhere in here. He makes a point this is another good point. He makes a point about Malcolm, and or somewhere he's making a point about how Black Americans, and he references a Black American, but his point is that Black Americans wanting this Pan-African identity go to Africa and realize that even when they look Black, it's not enough to unite with Africa. And I was like, again, this is missing the context. And I was thinking again of the celebration of Malcolm's birthday last year, where I went back and read this piece where Malcolm is in Ghana, and a Ghanaian asks him at a Q&A, Malcolm, man, you're not even that Black to be talking all this African unity stuff. And Malcolm's response was not to deny his relatively lighter skin and that, but to answer it in the context of a Black revolutionary, a Pan-Africanist, who then makes the point. I forgot exactly how he did it, but his answer was not to ignore that, but to address it within the context of Black and Pan-African unity. Whereas in Prashad's book, it's just left out there so that Prashad can make the point that he wants to make, that Black people can't be too essentialist around race, and have been, which is why, again, when I was somewhat impressed that he is making reference, even some positive, to Molefi Asante and others, and Renoka Rashidi. In fact, he even makes reference to Ahati Kalindi, the legendary African fighting science martial artist who recently passed, where we have a legendary interview with him that my colleague Dr. Haight put together some years ago on the channel, because Kalindi has that legendary story that we often like to tell, that he even recounted in the interview, where he is confronted at one point by 6 Detroit police officers, and he tells them, if you try to put your hands on me, it will be the last thing you do in your career. And he in fact did it. A cop put his hands on him, and that cop got tuned up to the point where he had to retire because he was physically incapable of working going forward. And those 6 police officers, had a so. But in here, Kalindi is reduced kind of to, you're over racializing, over essentializing race, and you just want to make everything Black and everything African, and Africans did the first martial arts, and Africans.
That's where he's.
And you know what I mean. So even if it's true, he's saying, even if it's true, it's kind of irrelevant and has nothing to, it was that kind of thing. So it was anyway. So that's that. The other thing I thought was just quickly interesting in terms of that is that, again, he's mentioned all these people, for too many Michael Eric Dyson references. That was
great. I was like, wow,
it's like enough with the Michael Eric Dyson. Yeah, what a time. but everything from George Lipsitz to Slavoj Žižek, like all these names he's referenced, like it was like a memory tour. And then in terms of that letter, that open
Kelly.
letter, you've got Prashad. It's just interesting. Prashad happens to be making references to Walden Bello, Angela Davis, Robin Kelly, all positive references, by the way. They're not criticism. He's just using them because they're popular scholarship, and all of them are on the letter that he's critical of, which I thought was pretty funny. So that was
well, I think he's also critical now of like Zizek too, because I think with with thankfully with who paid the Piper's book, Rockhill. When Rockhill first came out with the Counterpunch article that got him like a lot of focus, which is great. I think since then, with his help, but when I was reading this too, I thought it was funny was when he was mentioning, I now remember you talking about the karate thing. I just thought it was fascinating because I took like Africana was something in Africans and science thing. And obviously that was like really about quote unquote science. So it was about West Africa and East Africa and stuff, but I never heard this stuff. But what's funny too? It's like when I hear these things, for me, I do think like I hear versions of this from my own family with like, when they mention an uncle or two, an auntie says things like, well, in the Bhagavad Gita, and I'll touch on Kali because that was interesting about Rastafarianism. But there were planes, like if you read the Gita, they mention flying. So it was there, and I'm like, I get what I'm saying is I get where it's coming from. Because you want to like, prove yourself or say something like we were better than them, the Europeans. But I always say like, like we don't have to have like flying planes to prove that. Like we didn't have to like, I don't think that existed.
Look, rest in peace to I just went blank.
Oh,
the
sorry.
Legendary African scholar who the triple heritage of African, somebody's going to know the name. Why am I blanking out? I even took his class in grad school. This is crazy. I've sat with him and talked to him, and I've just completely gone blank on his name. I'm looking at his face. Ali Mazrui.
Oh, okay,
my God, I was struggling there for a second. But Ali Mazrui used to, he in his lectures would point out, he would say that the beef between Cheikh Anta Diop and Leopold Senghor was just that. Right. That Diop would say, we had everything the Europeans say that they count as civilization. We did all the science and the architecture, and we did all the religion and the philosophy. Yeah. We did all of that. And then Senghor was saying, yeah, we may have, but we didn't need to have done all of that. And we didn't have to have, that negritude was meant to promote the idea that we did not have to have, did not have to have done the things whites did to prove our value to humanity. So I always appreciate how Mazrui made that oversimplified.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I love that. Cause I, like I said, like I'm just always, cause I used to live in DC, and there was, folks on the corner who would say stuff, and sometimes I'd be like, that's interesting, like whatever. But cause like you just understand where it's coming from, and I get when people say things to me like, oh, did you know that we invented surgeries, which is true. There's a lot of things that are true, like surgeries, forms of anesthesia that I believe, and freaking universities and stuff like that. But with this book too, that's the thing that was so fascinating, because when he was mentioning all these things, like this is a little too much, like the kung fu, I actually found it kind of fascinating. I was like, that's really interesting. Like I didn't even know that existed. Like someone was trying to expose the African roots of that, or reveal the African roots of that. So I thought it was very fascinating.
And maybe I've been hanging out with too many materialists, but I'm just getting in my old age, I feel like I'm becoming that cliche of because I do feel this way. And I felt it again reading this, even reading about people that I still do hold in the highest regard. Cheikh Anta Diop was another one.
Right.
But my attitude at this point in my life is well, put a politer frame on it, is that however whatever we had evolved and had done was not enough to stop these crackers and colonists. So I don't care. I'm less impressed. I don't care if we did this first, or we did that first, or we did that, because none of it evolved to the stage where we could stop all this stuff from happening. And so I'm doing too much, but that is the mood I'm in lately. It's like, so even with the Mansa Musa stuff, and I know we're gonna get this new Coogler movie, bringing it back up. Ryan Coogler is doing a movie with what's his name from Creed and
Michael B. Jordan?
Wakanda, Michael B. Jordan playing Mansa Musa.
Oh, what?
And yeah, because again, the history used to be told to us that, we are to be honored by this man that could have led this largest kingdom in civilization, that could drop so much gold on Egypt that it depressed the economy for 100 years or whatever. And today in 2026, I'm saying, who gives a shit? All respect to Mansa Musa, but none of that has been able to stop these crackers from doing what is going on right now. So I don't care. It's the same way I just saw, and this is not at all my community, so I feel very, probably shouldn't even share this, but somebody was talking about this in the context of Palestinians recently, the greatness of their history and their people. And I'm like, but look at what it's not able to prevent. So I'm just saying, like, at the end of the day, whatever we think of our brilliant and beautiful past, we have to understand that more has to be done, because it didn't stop this. It didn't stop this. So again, please hear me, everyone, when I'm saying that this is a moment of frustration and me sharing. So I'm not meaning to disrespect these past and these
Well,
histories. It is just like I just want to.
yeah,
I do want to be a little bit like, and
yeah.
that's why I even titled this. Everybody was kung fu fighting. So what?
No, I agree with you. I think one thing I would just add is like, for me, I think his critiques about certain cultural essentialism, it just depends. Like with black folks, I have really mixed feelings about Billy Woods. Actually,
I don't know enough.
He's a great MC, and he talks about his work is like left, and he was interviewing the Jackman. It's really good. It's very like
okay.
it's very like it's very alternative. But he's gotten more of a mainstream break through some of his recent albums. But I actually do have issues with him. It's like one of those things where I like his music a lot, but I also have issues with some of his deep cynicism. Because if you listen to his music, you'll always come back, ironically, with the view that we always keep losing. Which I always...
Oh, wow.
Oh, I see that. Yeah, I think he did talk about that. I think he's originally from Zimbabwe or something, but I do want to say, like, the thing that I'm like with our book or what we choose to do, I do want to try to make the point that we don't always lose either. Like when he was talking about the 60s and 70s or the 80s too, they were yes, that's what I feel like. There were rounds of anti-colonialism that won huge things. So I feel like sometimes that gets lost. So that's when I don't like that with the Billy Woods and with some of these other books we've read. There's always this assumption that that there's a big gap between World War II and now. Like, right. And even when people say about neocolonialism, I totally get it. But when people rush towards saying, "Well, see, we got neocolonialism, nothing changed," I always want to be like, contextually speaking, A, that's not always true, and B, even if that did happen, the way in which the winning happened is still an amazing feat. Like with the Mau Mau and Kenya, it is a neo-colonial context, and Kenya is kind of like a little comrade and coward when it comes to Europeanness and Americanness and doing their BS in Haiti too, along with India too. But the way they won their freedom was monumental. Like the struggle, the fact that Britain was very eager to keep Kenya as a colony, not even a neo-colony, and was selling pieces of land in the moment. And then they just ran through that and said no. And even other countries were like, no, we are living in it. To me, I feel like things happen now where people just like, okay, this is going to sound really, really harsh the way you say. There is also a type of socialism that loves and romanticizes loss than it does want to deal and contend with state power. Like, for example, every year we have a respect for the Paris Commune, which is fine. I get it. But there's this current type of socialist that looks at that, or radical is like, for those brilliant 100 days or however long, it was just a beautiful, like it was like, and then they were crushed. But then they'll have words to say about other countries, like we said with the letter. But there's something to be said about countries that actually won power and kept it. And yes, it got messy, but to me, that's like something to at least abide by. And I think for some people, there's a certain kind of radicalism that's being reinvented where they don't want to touch that. They don't want to touch the messiness of state power and the messiness of what you need to do in revolution, to counter revolution. Like with Iran, I'm a Marxist-Leninist. I would prefer a Marxist-Leninist government eventually. But if I was an Iranian person and there were these sort of like, let's say, concerns about Israel espionage, yes, I would be very paranoid about who's saying what and what. You know what I'm saying? So that's like reality. And I think you would understand that better, not you, but that side would understand it better if they remembered that tradition. But it's not. But I also wonder how much of certain people are doing that purposely to sort of almost like forget that tradition, because there's a lot of shame attached to socialism still. Like people don't want to talk about the USSR. They always want to buzz past it, or just like it was a failure. I mean, it lasted 70 years. So I would like to know more about what it did and didn't do well. So to my point, this book, at least what I hope is like we can continue is like saying, no, we don't even have to reinvent. We do have to reinvent because it's a new era. but we also have a pool of traditions that we can pull from. The Bandung and with your point too about the new era thing, also that's true. Like when people say things like Africa was this or Asia was this or South America was this, I have sometimes a similar response, sometimes where I'm like, great. But now we're living in the shadow of capitalism. So we do have to update. And that's what Walter Rodney said. He did say, like, there's lots of things that Africanists can do for the current moment that we don't have to do that Marxist-Leninists do in Europe. He's obviously, but he also said, but we got changed already. So you can't pretend that there wasn't this moment of colonialism or capitalism that you have to like deal with. Like you have to deal with global capitalism and destroy it. So how do you build the power to do it?
And as I've simplified it, there is nothing going on currently on the African continent that is authentically African. None of the formations are authentically African. There is no country on the continent that is born out of an authentically African process. They're all responses to imperialism, and they're all inauthentic to what would have been so-called pre-colonial traditional African worldviews and systems and of governance, etc.
Right.
So I've always taken Huey Newton's argument somewhat seriously as well, where he made the point that there are no nations to which we can decolonize. So there is no, in other words, as I've understood it, you aren't Kenya isn't a nation, isn't a pre-colonial construct that can be decolonized. It is itself a colonial construct. So the only response to it is its complete erasure and a redefinition of human societies, in his words, under intercommunalism, some form of intercommunalism. So I appreciate all of that. Again, at the same time, I do hold on to this point that I do want, starting with Black people here in the United States and then extending throughout the African diaspora, I want those communities to be appreciative of what their pre-colonial paths have contributed, as well as the colonial, like to your point, like a lot of struggle and progress has occurred through these ignoble settings, colonial structures that have forced, at minimum, the imperialists to refigure and repurpose or rebrand their own, so I again also appreciate that, as I've for a long time wanted a stronger and more good faith discussion or debate between the materialists and the cultural nationalists, that Prashad, because I was shocked to keep seeing all these references, even positive references to the Afrocentric idea, to Hati Kalindi, to Runoko Rashidi, to, I was like, wow, Prashad actually did what I've been wanting people in the Black materialist world to do for a long time. He actually read some of this stuff, even if he doesn't fully, I think, grasp it or agree with it. He at least read it. And I think a lot does not happen in that. So listen, I do have a thing at 1 o'clock, so I have to start to move but I did want to, some of what we've been talking about, I think is somewhat of a segue. So if it works for you, let me know. Or not, we can come back to it. I told you before we went on today that I went and read one of your January Substacks on the DSA, and you explain why you're in the DSA, and you go through pros and cons of the DSA, and ultimately advocate for people joining the DSA. What I didn't tell you, Sudip, that I'll share with you now publicly, it is through reading some of your work and these Donut King discussions that I've been moved at least a little bit to want to hear the argument more and learn more about the DSA. Because I admit I'm decidedly opposed to those efforts. But you cut an impressive, figure and argument, and I, am listening and hearing. So, I was also reminded that I'm not deeply engaged DSA arguments and histories. Have recently learned one or two other things about it. But so I at least saw, so since, we have these routine conversations, and you have this political situation or whatever, you're situated politically, that we shouldn't just let it sit in the margins. And I wanted to ask you about it. So if you wouldn't mind, like maybe give a quick summary of what is the DSA and why you find it a valuable political vehicle for you. And in particular, you said, for instance, in there, you said the DSA is a socialist organization.
Right.
And I've always understood it to not be
Right.
what I've understood to be a socialist organization, advocating socialism as I've understood it. So could you?
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I mean, listen, to be honest with you, I think anyone should just join a group anyway. So that was the reason why I wrote that piece, was to actually argue internally. It was kind of like an internal argument to some people in DSA spaces or DSA adjacent spaces that are a little bit like maybe anti-DSA, because I'm also very pessimistic about certain things. Like you've seen the article where I am very open and honest about some of my miserable experiences within DSA, and my partner's against the DSA. Like, she tells me all the time, don't do it. But I'm also the managing editor of Socialist Forum, which is the DSA's main theoretical journal. We have two media outfits. One is the Dem Left, which is more like book reviews and recent events reporting, like 1,500 words, 1,200 words. But our piece, our side of it, is the theoretical side. So 4,000 to 8,000 words. I think I sent you a recent piece that I co-wrote about the case for dismantling the Israeli state. So I am actually part of the quote unquote leadership on that end, the media propaganda end. And so people like me do exist. That's the only thing I want to also raise to other people outside of it who are like ultra left, in my opinion, or even maybe a little bit too liberal. Like, there's two sides of it that I argue against typically. The ultra left who says like the DSA is just the Michael Harrington's ghost, basically, like he's just living in us, and which is true to a segment, but it's not the reality entirely. What's happening is you have a lot of infighting and growth, and you also have just a ton of people coming in who are trying to develop their politics fast enough. But the Harrington stuff is not existent in an explicit way. So that's the ghost I want to deal with. But then there's the Soc Dem right, or the liberal side, who also criticize the DSA, ironically, from the right wing. Because like recently, the DSA has also approached nationally an anti-Zionist measure, which we passed, I think, a year or two ago in our convention, an explicitly anti-Zionist measure, because the founder of DSA, Michael Harrington, was a Zionist in the 80s when he formed it. And for a long time, it was kind of like informally understood that Zionism is not good. But a couple of colleagues actually did a convention discussion and did a vote, and most DSAers, even though it was like a slightly thin margin, most DSAers were for the anti-Zionist measure, which basically said, if you are against BDS, like, you can be silent if you're a DSA member. Don't even say a word. But if you come out against BDS and these other things that we're trying to do, then you should have like some sort of not punishment, but like consequence. Like, you should be muted, or someone should approach you and say, this is against our terms of agreement. So that's happening. But where I also feel like there are legitimate critiques is the fact the DSA is also very split anyway, internally. The National Political Committee is mostly left of socialism. So I'm part of the Red Star group, which is the Marxist-Leninist group. We are openly Marxist-Leninist. I think John L., you've had one time, Renee and you interviewed. He's from Louisiana, I believe. He's a member of our group. You actually had me back to back. So he's like comrades with me. And then Megan Romer, who has had some recent interviews about DSA with Brianna Joy Gray, with the New Yorker. She is our co-chair of the group, but she's also part of our faction. So there are these like factions that internally that do matter. I do think the DSA is like social democrat, maybe. I'm not, I maybe wrote that really fast, admittedly, because it's a Substack. But it is also, it is a little bit more socialist than people think. There's definitely more of that going on. There's a lot of Marxist-Leninist Maoists too. But also, I don't know how to say this because I'm also very like honest about this, but as a leader, as a managing editor of DSA, so I also don't want to be like, I don't like it. But there are also people and outside forces who are still, I would argue, center-right, and who are trying to pull the DSA away from certain things we're trying to pull closer towards. But if you listen to Megan Romer, who is our co-chair, she is very strong about things like abolish the police and stuff. Like, that's also part of the DSA platform. If you look at the national agenda, which was also discussed, so this is wasn't one or two people, it was discussed conventionally. People agreed among all our factions about abolish the police, defund, and all that kind of stuff. I would suggest people look at our interviews with Brianna Joy Gray and David Remnick at the New Yorker, just to see also how I think Brianna Joy Gray is a great interviewer, so she does a better job. David Remnick is a Zionist. So he was very, very. I didn't watch the whole interview because I couldn't take it because it's the New Yorker. He was very hard on Megan Romer, but she stood pretty square on where she stood. So that's where I see it. It's a complicated web, but the NPC exists. It has a lot of Marxist-Leninists and Maoists and people who are Marxists. But there's also like a lot of people joining, many of whom are just politically underdeveloped. And we yet have had the institutional buildup to develop them fast enough. So that is an issue.
But ultimately your argument, you think there is a possibility to take over the Democratic Party and turn it into
that's not my belief.
Okay, so what is the DSA? So what is
that's a thing about like I just want to. There's a debate about it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some people who believe in that, and there's others who don't, and it's almost like an even split.
So those who don't are arguing that the DSA then become its own political party.
I personally I say that. I don't know. I don't speak for everyone, but personally, that's what I believe. Mm-hmm. And I'm part of Red Star. That's what I believe. I do not think that, like, okay, I'm also a little bit like, I do believe government's important. So that's one thing Red Star believe. We do believe in institutional values and trying to build government and build from the base up, but we're not fans of taking over the Democratic Party. We're fans of, even with the Lenin August Nims approach. If you run a candidate, you run a candidate to assess the quality of the political landscape. You run a candidate to say, my views on abolish ICE is this. I'm an anti-Zionist for this. I might lose, but I'm going to come out of this election doing two things. One, assess who believes in these things right now, which proves like how much more work we have to do. And secondarily, leave behind a movement space, like organizations that support a candidate, bare minimum, who can carry on the fight with those groups. So that's the Red Star thing, at least in my mind. But I don't want to speak for the caucus entirely. But for me, I am not a fan of taking over the Democratic Party. I do think of strategic things like, fine, just run somebody because that's the way the primary works. Fine. But my version is never to take it over. Like what Mamdani is saying, and I actually respect him because maybe I'm a Desi person, whatever. But him saying like the Democratic Party used to be FDR, I don't care. The Democratic Party is a losing institution. It's a capitalist institution. It cannot be reformed.
Well, by that logic, you could then just go back and say the Democratic Party also used to be the party of the plantation,
right? No, I agree.
Democracy. So then, what? I don't understand. Like what?
But I agree with you, and that's where I'm positing. So there's people in the DSA who don't agree with that. So there's a lot. The only thing I think people get wrong about the DSA, like for instance, I think some people think the DSA. There are people public facing who present the DSA in a way that's quite narrow. So you might see public facing people who present themselves as DSAites, maybe people like you talk about Jacobin folks. I actually don't mind the Jacobins. I'm not trying to be a whatever. But there are some people who are maybe adjacent to that who present themselves as leaders of the DSA and they're not. So I think that's where the confusion comes from. People see them talk, see their articles, and they're like, oh, that's what the DSA believes in. No. Megan Romer is our co-chair. Ashik is the other, like those are our co-chairs that we elected. And we have a national platform that says abolish the police, that says, anti-Zionism, that says all these different things. So it's not like, I think that's where the confusion comes from. But me personally, I'm not like also, I believe in organization and I believe in going where people are coming in. And I think with the DSA, we have seen a lot of people joining. That's where I fall in line. I'm going to go to where the people are and get them more radicalized. But to be honest, I also argue for people to join any group. Like I'm not one of those people who's also a DSA-ite in that way. I don't think I barely talk about it. Like PSL, I voted for the candidates for the. So
it's not DSA only for you.
It's ideology.
But part of what also has me curious is as I'm trying to watch some of the discussion nationally, and even this week in my classroom, oddly enough, around the quote unquote victories of DSA candidates in recent elections, and then the backlash from the Democratic Party mainstream. Right. I think it's funny to watch Hakeem Jeffries talk about we don't want them and they're not, and that old grizzled bald white man from Louisiana talking about I'm quitting the party. That I quit the party. The DSA Meanwhile, his wife had been a Republican all those years. Remember that used to be their joke. Right,
used to be their like love story. Like they hate each other, but they love each other.
Cross the aisle love story. Yeah. And now he can't be in a party with DSA
with Mamdani. Well, there's anti-Muslim bigotry. That's. I think all of this is related to
Yeah.
Zionism. I do think it's just there are
I
DSA,
see.
there's democratic establishment that I think are wedded to Zionism and they're wedded to colonialism, and they're just upset because this is me talking to everyone in there. I'm not representing DSA. I'm very disciplined about that too. So there's some discipline that some of us believe in actually, but I'll say personally, Abdul Al Sayed, fine, but even I think it's quite an interesting contradiction that he's not a socialist. So I can identify the fact that he's being attacked for being Muslim, and he's also anti-Zionist to a degree, but he's not a socialist. So in my view, I just want candidates who are socialist and who, like Andre Easton, who's running in the Bronx. I had him do a Q&A for my Substack, and he's a PSL candidate. So I don't have that allegiance. So Green Party folks, PSL folks, you'll find some DSA people who believe that alliance. The thing that happens with DSA is that we have so many people joining, considering every other group, to be honest. I think, unfortunately, we just don't have yet the manpower or the human power to develop everyone politically. So that's why you'll see the chapters go every which way if they're big enough. Like, so many different things are going on. In Philly DSA, I have comrades who are very involved with Palestine, extremely involved. There's an international solidarity committee that we've created. So you'll still see that too. So DSA is at a space where you'll see a lot of its contradictions start to bubble up because so many people are joining for also really legitimate reasons. They're joining for Palestine, and then they're also joining for ICE. A lot of people are scared about ICE. Yeah.
Well, part of it, and I invite people to check out. I think it's a Black Liberation Media members, patrons only so far discussion we just had with Renee and Lawrence Grand Prix of Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle here in Baltimore, Maryland, where he made an interesting argument in response to some of the claims around DSA folks that people like, in his example here in Maryland, Malcolm Ruff's election, being credited to the Democratic Party or the DSA's influence on the Democratic Party, when in reality, I hope I'm getting his argument close enough to right. What's happening, especially in this case here in Maryland, is a Black community and Black organized community push to get candidates elected is being credited as a DSA victory because they're running within the DSA. It's assumed that the DSA got the victory as opposed to these Black communities pushing, and that in so doing, when DSA folks, Grand Prix is focused on a recent, uses the example of Crystal Ball. In one of her Breaking Points interviews. Because she makes the point that this is a sign that the DSA is taking over, and and she's doing the classic thing of white socialists wanting to deny Black agency and radicalism and pre-organization. So it's a very interesting discussion.
I believe that. That's the thing. If you the Substack, like, I was glad when you messaged me. I was like, I even forgot the article because I wrote it back in. So I was like, I looked it up myself. So I was like, oh God, I don't want to defend DSA because I was like, but I was like, because I have a mixed approach. Like, I'm just being real. I'm the managing editor of DSA Socialist Forum. I'm open to all phases of who wants to write what, as long as they're DSA. That's the only criteria. But if you look at what we've done so far, we have articles denouncing NATO. We have articles. The International Committee in DSA is great. They've been very, very quote unquote, I don't say tanky, but they've been accused of tankyism. So they've been great. So there is these elements in DSA that work. That's the only criticism I have, like, broader. There's like some other leftists that I think about who are socialists who attack DSA in a way that's not, I don't think, it doesn't speak to reality, like the Michael Harrington stuff. That's not happening. Okay. No one knows not no one. There's a certain milieu who does believe in them. But I didn't know who the heck he was when I first joined. And I got to learn about him later, and I gave up. I don't care. The real critique should be about DSA's other stuff, like you mentioned, which I have critiques of. Like, I was also, I did a lot of work in New Jersey DSA and such, and it was great to a sense, but there is a real lack of Black and brown people. There's a real lack of these certain working class people from these communities. So that's a critique I would still have. And I think that comes from the fact that DSA still has some avenues of leadership where folks are, yes, white, but they're also just like not, and also some people of color, to be frank, they just don't have a relationship with certain communities that need to be had. that's a critique I would go with. So for me, it's always complicated because when I wrote that piece, it was more like a piece saying to people, just join a group. That's how I should have said it instead. But I wanted to get some clicks, to be honest. Like DSA, you're, but that's the way I feel it. If you Green Party, if you PSL, as long as we work together on certain criteria of really important things like anti-imperialism and stuff, and socialism, for me, I'm cool with it. But also to your other things, is Renee and you have like really substantial critiques of the DSA, which I'm always in the chat being like, I agree. I also think the DSA at one point, in my view, is going to have to shed its skin and become something, again, different. For me, I'm only in DSA because that's where I see a lot of communists. Like, the CPUSA is also great, too. I have a friend, Anthony Balas, or a comrade, who I've co-written article on Maduro being arrested, and how his arrest is, if he's not made free, is fascism. And it's been proven right ever since he got arrested. It was actually translated in Iran by a Marxist group there. So he showed me the piece. Yeah. So I was the most proud moment. I was like, forget a letter. I got an actual,
congrats,
I got something in Farsi. That's the other thing with the letter. It was not written in Farsi. So who were they writing for? It was so weird. A friend of mine said, is this in Farsi? I was like, oh, that's a good point. And he looked it up. He's like, it's not even in Farsi. So whatever the case
story
may
on
be,
that is still yet to be told.
But I do agree. I would love to talk more about this. I know 1 p.m. is coming up, but I just want to tell people, you don't need to join DSA, but I would, because I also don't want to send people of color to spaces where who knows where you are, where you're going to be disappointed and stressed out. What I would say is that please just join an org. And if you do see a DSA event that's happening, or to your point, Crystal Ball, who's representing certain ideas, they're not elected people. I'm not saying you shouldn't criticize, but they're not the face of it.
Right.
Yeah, that's all I would say, is that they're not.
No, that's why I wanted look, that's why I wanted to have this. Look, I as I said, I have a severe standing bias against the Democratic Party and in general certain what I deem liberal politics, but at the same time I am trying to figure out and argue for a version of how we engage electoral politics, and I'm interested in various arguments. All that said, also that as we've been doing this project, I'm learning more about, how you think in your work, and I appreciate it. And then you're sitting here as an elected member and as representative of the DSA, and we haven't talked about it. So that's why I was let me ask you, because I'm learning. I'm trying to learn more about it. I again, my where I am with it is where I am, but I also admit I haven't paid that much attention. So and I know that a lot of the popular discussions of it are not going to be accurate. So again, as we're sitting here, I'm like, I like the way this dude thinks. Let me just ask him about it.
Thank you.
And see what it is. So I appreciate that you wrote that piece, and I think you should consider another one, given the resurgence of the conversation around DSA versus the Democrats and all this other, and given your situation in politics, I think it'd be great if you had more to say on it.
No, definitely. And I just want to say thank you for doing that, because I knew look, to everyone in the chat, I'm not saying join DSA. I actually think I'm just saying there's a lot of factions in there. There's a lot more stuff and nuance in there. You might come across somebody who's like a crystal ball in real life. Sorry about that, because that's real too. But I'm just saying there's also things you can look on for yourself. So go to the interviews that Megan Romer did and see what she has to say. Go to our DSA national platform, see if you like it or not, and that's it. You don't have to join it. I don't really care that much like that. I just say like it's more than what some people present it as, not from the critique side, but those who take on the mantle of like, this is what it is, and it's not that. It really isn't like the crystal ball, or I don't want to name, because I want to be respectful, but certain other writers I get into a little argument online who are even against the platform, who are like, we don't need to abolish the police. Like there's some people who are DSA members maybe, who are social media heavy, which blurs the line between social media influencer and actual intellectual, which is what Nick Estes said. That's Nick. But the thing is, they say stuff. But there's those of us who are maybe I'm not as disciplined, but there's those of us who are more disciplined, who don't say things, because there's also a certain kind of, there's also a behavioral institutional attitude that's different. I think DSA needs to figure out, which is to Geechee's and Amber's discussion this Friday, which is about structuralism, structure and stuff like that. Because I say stuff, but I also pull back. So sometimes you'll see people just explain DSA, but they're not really elected. And I do want to say, like, the case for dismantling Israel, that's an article I wrote with Joanna, a comrade, and that's that's on the DSA socialist forum. So those ideas are getting there too. And that's something I worked a lot on. So if people want to read that and just see what they think, if they agree with it or not, that's how I think maybe some aspects of DSAism exists.
Well, I at least, was moved by seeing once again Hakeem Jeffries seemingly in near tears complaining about the DSA, and was like, well, shit, then maybe I
He
need
met
to
Jared Kushner, I think.
He did.
Yeah,
Again,
so
this is
that's his
look again. I think
sad
it is, and I just to complete the joke in a reference to this book. I mean, the critique of Afrocentricity in here holds. If we look at Hakeem's uncle being Leonard Jeffries, who not only defended at the time Barack Obama as being good for Black people, but whose nephew is the Zionist, Democratic Party. I'm not blaming Leonard Jeffries for that. And I'm obviously not blaming Afrocentricity for it. I'm just trying to complete the arc of a joke. If people will walk with me on that a little bit. Obviously, even the sins of, well, whatever, that's the reverse, but you can't be blamed for the sins of your father or your son or your nephew, necessarily, at least. So I don't know.
Right.
But Sudip, man, thank you very much. I'll remind everybody that the link to your work is in the show description, including the review you just did for The Loneliest American, and the link to our full Donut King playlist is also in the show description. So I encourage people to check out those other discussions as well. And I appreciate you, sort of on the fly responding to the DSA question as well. And I look forward to our next edition here.
Same. This is fun.
I really do. I love these discussions. So
it's fun.
Thanks to you. And again, thanks to our undefeated chat for doing their undefeatedness. Big thanks to you all again. Please do like, share, subscribe, do all the things, support Sudip's work. Please at least check out the Memoir Project if you haven't already. The QR code or the link is in the show description. You know what I'm saying? If Malcolm X's daughter can support, who are you? No, I'm just playing. Not to support. But no, thanks everybody, and peace as always, as long as you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to point out. And you know what it is. We always have to remember.
We should support Black businesses. We got to support Black. My buddy Jared Ball, Dr. Ball, who is at Morgan State, talks about this myth of Black buying power. Another brother who teaches at Duke University, Sandy Darity, says, we can't pool our money together and using that, buy our way out of oppression.
Right.
This is
never buy your way out.
You can't buy your way out. We can't create enough millionaires in a capitalist society. It just can't. Nick, as much money as you do or don't have, you can't write a check for everything you worth and free us.
Right.
It's not possible in a capitalist society.
Right.
I mean, LeBron James, that's great, brother. You're an employee.
Yeah.
You could be making $100 million a year, but guess what? Any cat that can write you a check for $100 million a year is making more money than you can count. You know what I'm saying?
And it's unfortunate because we do have so many young, prominent,
come on, brother,
Black individuals, but that oppression, capitalism, we will never overcome it.
No,
we can operate within it.
Right.